The story begins in a market where the protagonist, a young boy, approaches a meat stall. He tells the shopkeeper that the pork was ripe for sale, and demands the melons instead, insisting that he doesn't want any bits of skin on them. The man, surprised by the request, asks if the boy was looking for trouble. The boy pokes him and asks if the man plans to kill him. The shopkeeper, irritated, jumps toward protagonist with a weapon in hand, and slices the boy into minced meat. As the boy was going to be hit, he mutters that he will take the man's life, and then proceed to use the radio calisthenics. But in the end he was attacked again and found dead. The man quickly leaves, declaring that he won't hold back. After everyone departs, the boy reappears in a distance, mentioning how painful it was to return to life. He checks the first body, takes the wallet, and notes how horrifically he died. He then asks the system to increase his level. As he checks his profile, he finds his death rating was at level C. He realizes that this was his first rating, and immediately activates the beginner immortality punch. However, he notices that using the punch consumes his skill points. He wonders if this was the correct way to use the system, exchanging skill points for a skin set mastery. 5 points were spent on the beginner immortality punch, and now he wonders what the remaining 20 points could grant him. He asked the system to maximize the immortality punch. As the system processed the information, it declared that he was unqualified, and now the points would be distributed randomly. He wondered if this meant the system was basically encouraging him to die more. However, he decided to test it. He could try it against Butcher Jen. As Miss Snow had mentioned, that Butcher was a secret member of a martial arts faction. Kalmo knew he couldn't let him get away, and at the very least, Butcher would have to kill him a few more times. The scene shifts to an old house in the middle of a forest, where the Butcher was writing a letter to his master. He confesses that he couldn't resist that day, and had killed a child, who claimed to be seeking revenge for the Cow family. However, he notes that the Cow family had been erased half a year ago, with no known descendants left, which he found suspicious. He wonders if it's possible that someone from the Cow family survived, and was now seeking revenge. Regardless, he assures his master that the entire Cow family was dead, and he had been fortunate to eliminate them quickly. Suddenly someone knocks at the door. The man stands up and calls out, asking who's there. When the boy enters, the man was shocked to see him and exclaims, "Wasn't he dead?" The boy introduces himself as Pao Mu, and explains that the man had killed his brother Mu, so now he must pay the price for that. With a swift motion, Xiaomi attacks using his secret technique, 100% bare hand blade catch. As the man moved to attack, Xiaomi stopped him, the blade now in his hand. Xiaomi replied that he had caught the blade, and dared the man to kill him if he could. Although terribly, he forced himself to remain boastful. The man asked if Kyomu was crazy, mentioning that both he and his brother had lost their minds. The man thought the blade was already stuck, and that Kyomu couldn't move. Kyomu delivered a punch, knocking the man back. The man, surprised, noted that Kyomu was different from his brother, and could sense that Kyomu had trained hard in martial arts. The man's focus was shifting, but he vowed that it wouldn't happen again. 5 minutes later, the man finally struck Xiaomu, who fell seemingly dead. The man sat down, and muttered that he had witnessed the revenge of Xiaomu's brother. But he wasn't a hero, just a crazy boy. Things had changed, and if he had sent the letter earlier, his master would have been missiled. Suddenly something flew toward him, and another boy appeared, angrily confronting the man for killing Kalmu. The man, infuriated, threatened to kill them all if they sought death. After a brief fight, the man observed that the older boy was stronger, especially after he killed the younger one. He questioned how long this cycle would continue, and how many more of them there were. Another older boy appeared, mentioning that he had died 4 times. After checking his stats, he noticed his mastery had increased. It seemed that the higher the mastery, the more points were spent and the fewer points would be distributed. The system couldn't allow one person to be ground down too many times. He thought that he would only have one more chance to revive, and it would be difficult to get revenge. Maybe he would come back in 7 days. For now, he was hiding behind a statue, thinking the man was already so weak from fighting his other brothers that this was the perfect opportunity to attack. During their 4th fight, with only 20% mastery in the Immortal Punch, they were almost evenly matched, but with his increasing strength, he now had a better chance of victory. It was worth a shot. He decided to finish the mission quickly and find Miss Snow to learn other skill sets. The man injured from the previous battles muttered to himself that the kids all looked similar, each one slightly stronger than the last. They punched harder and their skills had improved. The previous boy had been on par with the man, and he doubted he could handle another one. He looked around thinking there shouldn't be any more. But just then the boy spoke up. He was standing on a statue, behind the man. The boy jumped and landed a punch that finally killed the man. As the man fell, the boy received a large number of bronze coins and a letter. He wondered if it was the secret letter the man had been planning to give to the martial arts faction. The intel that Chao Kongsu had provided was correct. The butcher was indeed involved in the killing of the Qi family. The first time the man killed him, his death rating was C. He began to wonder if the rating was related to the strength of the one who killed him. Perhaps a stronger villain would result in a higher rating. He would need to test this theory out. He couldn't decipher the other letter, so he decided to give it to Miss Snow to see what she could make of it. Afterward, the boy made his way to the outskirts of Yen City and arrived at the alleyway in front of Miss Snow's house. As he approached, she opened the door blindfolded and wondered aloud where he had been. Upon hearing his voice, she set her handbag down and remarked that it sounded different. She was certain he was not Cao Mu. He thought to himself, as expected from a blind girl. Her senses were incredibly sharp. It was clear that both his strength and hers had increased, and he had become more like a man. He invited her inside, telling her that everyone had to go through it eventually. She questioned whether it was really him. Not quite believing him, how can he prove he was Cao Mu? She asked. He replied with a question of his own, asking if Ning really wasn't her surname. She paused, then reminded him that he had come to her last month. Asking the same thing, she moved closer to him, and he couldn't help but think how lucky he was. She then pulled back slightly, still staring at him. It's really him. She said that he still smelled the same. She sat down to have something to eat, and mentioned that, after the Cao family's death, her eyes had started to move, an indication that the divine sign was about to activate. Nothing could hide from it. She then asked if he was trying to trick her. He thought of the divine sight, and reminded himself not to mess with her. He showed her the letter and told Miss Snow that she was the last surviving member of the Cao family. The legendary martial artist had spared her because of her extraordinary talent. He then asked when she was going to teach him the next chapter of the Immortality Punch. Miss Snow cautioned him not to set his hopes too high too soon. She explained that to become truly skilled, he needed more than just talent. He also needed more experience and strength, which would take at least a few years to develop. He replied that he wanted to see the Cao family's revenge fulfilled, which was the agreement they had made initially. She would teach him the Immortality Punch, and then he would avenge the Cao family. He felt he already had plenty of strength to carry that out. Miss Snow grabbed his hands and said he was so stubborn. Then she guided his hands to touch her body, asking him to show her what he had learned so far. She just touched his biceps and found it to be incredibly hard. The intensity surprised her. As she took her handbag, realizing something was different, she asked him what he had let her touch. He replied that it was his biceps, and then asked what she thought. Simon noted that they had only known each other for a month, and he had already grown so much, which made her wonder if he was a martial arts prodigy. She marveled at his strength, mentioning that such power was a fundamental skill with no shortcuts. Cao Mu responded that since she believed he had done well, perhaps she could teach him. He explained that the Immortal Punch was a special skill of the Yang family, and once he fully mastered it, he would reach a stage where he would age but remain as strong, truly on the path to divinity. He was determined to complete this as soon as possible. Snow praised his progress, but reminded him it had only been a month. She mentioned that even the butcher had mastered his punch, despite his arm being capable of hundreds of kilos of force. Once Gaomei's training was complete, he would have slain the butcher, and then she would teach him everything else. He confidently replied that she didn't need to wait, as he had already slain the butcher. Snow was shocked and exclaimed, "That's impossible." He told her that not only had he killed the butcher, but he had also found the secret letter. However, he couldn't understand the tadpole script written on it. She was intrigued by the letter, and explained that the tadpole script was a secret method of communication, used by martial arts factions. It seemed he had truly killed the butcher, but she still couldn't fully believe it. She then told him that since he had done what he said, she would honor her promise and teach him the various sections of the immortality punch. She asked him to sit down and meditate in front of her. As she taught him, he did as she asked, and she continued to teach him for half an hour. By then his immortality punch had advanced by 40%. He thought to himself that there hadn't been any real changes in his mastery, and the system was much more effective than trying to master on his own. He realized he needed to find enemies stronger than the butcher to challenge and improve further. She then handed him a notebook, explaining that it contained the key to decoding the tadpole script. She told him to go through it and read aloud to her what the letter said. He took the notebook thinking that she couldn't see, but she quickly found the key without any problems. He guessed that she might not be blind. As he read through the letter, he mentioned that it stated, the Crimson Emperor was leaving the capital soon, and the martial arts faction was planning to summon all its members for an assassination. Snow stood up, shocked, and asked where the faction was planning to assassinate the Emperor. She pressed further, asking about the Emperor's whereabouts, and if there were any more details. He replied that the key was missing quite a bit of information, and he could only decipher parts of the letter. He couldn't figure out the exact time or place. Snow sat back down, visibly frustrated, wondering how the martial arts faction dared to carry out such a plan. Still, it seemed likely he would attempt it. He asked if the faction was strong. Snow explained that she had only told him about the faction and the legendary martial artist who had killed the entire Jia family, but didn't explain the reasons behind it. This legendary martial artist, also known as the second strongest supreme martial arts master, founded the faction and single-handedly destroyed many other factions and gangs. He took control of the secret arts of all factions, allowing his members to read freely in order to improve their skills. The Cow family's immortality punch was a gift from the divine to the first generation, but it too met its fate. Her hands started to tremble as she spoke, and she admitted that she had taught Kyo Mu the immortality punch, not to expect that he would defeat the legendary martial artist. Rather, she had hoped that one day when his skills matured, he could eventually defeat him, so that she could kill the martial artist with her own hands. Chao Mu suggested an idea. He would join the faction himself. Snow was surprised and asked if he had gone crazy thinking about joining the faction. He climbed onto the table and explained that he would join the faction, then assassinate the Crimson Emperor on their behalf, turning the imperial court and the faction against each other. If he couldn't join the faction, he would continue defeating its members, trying to uncover their entire assassination plan. At that point he could act as the assassin, enraging the imperial court, which would allow Snow to take a revenge. She told him he was out of his mind. With a plan like that he would surely die. He responded that it was a chance to be the Emperor's assassin, and if he died as one, people would likely remember him. His death would probably raise his notoriety in the faction. Founded by the second strongest martial artist, had many secret arts books. His members could read all of them, including the secrets behind the immortality punch. It was like a dream place for him to level up. He continues saying that, since the martial artist was as strong as she had described, getting revenge would be nearly impossible. At best they might cause some trouble, but that would be the best plan he could come up with. Snow replied that he might even die in the process. He acted cool, asking, "What's there to fear?" He thought there was no trace of deceit, only excitement, and he was completely serious about it. Still, Snow was confused, wondering why he would do something like this. The immortality punch meant nothing compared to his life, so what else could she offer him? She felt strange, thinking maybe he wanted something more from her. As her face turned red, Kiyomi was confused and asked, what was she thinking now? She replied that she simply felt a great debt of gratitude toward him, and wondered if there was nothing she could do for him in return. She thought to herself, a warrior like Chao Mu, how could he think such things? He shouldn't have thought that way. He looked at her seriously and said, there was something only she could do. When she asked what it was, he responded that it was a secret. The two of them fell silent for a while, and then he spoke again, saying it was enough. He asked if she knew any other members of the faction around here. Snow agreed, mentioning the name of the Lord of Yen City, Hu Yen. There was a sudden shift in the market, as the Gu family's young master arrived on horseback, surrounded by a few men who were pushing around the common people. The civilians, frightened for their lives, scrambled to escape, one man approached the young master and pointed out that all the people were fleeing. The young master, with a sly grin, pointed toward a lady and a boy, ordering, "Bring that beauty to me." His men drew their swords in anger, but the girl called him shameless, declaring she would rather die than follow his orders. A bulky man stepped forward to stop the boy, saying their young master was summoning him. The girl was shocked and wondered if the young master was referring to her. The boy, outraged, shouted that it was shameless. The girl offered her help, and together they would teach these men a lesson. This only angered the young master more, and he ordered his men to put the girl in her place. His men moved in to grab her, but as they did, Chow Mao, sitting on the roof just above them, jumped down and grabbed the young master by his collar. The young master, struggling, demanded, "Let him go," and his father was the lord of this city. Chow Mao asked who he was. The young master replied that his father was coming soon, and that Chow Mao wouldn't be able to escape once his father arrived. Kato Mu would surely be begging for death. Kato Mu thought to himself that originally he had planned to step in, kill them, and get killed by the bodyguards. But if a lord killed him instead, wouldn't his death rating be even higher? He noticed the estimated rating was C+, and he realized that this was the first time a rating notification had appeared. It seemed the system agreed with his plan. The men tried to save their young master, and someone called out asking why Chimu was bothering to help him. They pointed out that the young master was so powerful, and Chimu was only getting himself into trouble, so they advised him to leave. The girl was also confused by the situation. As the men approached Chimu, "We told them to stop," the young master pleaded for mercy. But Kyle Mu told him not to surrender so quickly, and to bring his father over. Finally, Gobian arrived, and Kyle Mu felt his presence was incredibly strong. Gobian shouted for silence, and Kyle Mu could feel the immense power behind. He realized that Gu must have mastered martial arts, to the point where he could release such force with a single shout. Gu looked at Kyle Mu, sensing his weak aura, and thought, was this a beginner martial artist? However, he was surprised by Kylie's strength, noting how easily he had lifted someone. His arm strength was truly impressive. Gu dismounted from his horse, exuding an overwhelming aura around him. Chow Mu felt as though an immense weight was pressing down on him. Causing great pain, he asked Gu to stop. Gu thought that Chow Mu was speaking, despite being under such pressure, which was unusual. Most people couldn't even speak when overwhelmed by such an aura. This made Gu realize that Chow Mu was much stronger than he appeared. Gu, of trying to be kind, told Chow Mu not to be rash and to talk things over. He acknowledged that his son had indeed gone too far, but he asked Chow Mu to let him go. He promised that he would be more lenient with his son in the future. Child Mu, confused, thought that Guo was acting apologetic, even though he had just been threatening him. How was he supposed to take him seriously? He realized that his death rating hadn't increased, which meant he still had a chance. Chow moved and shouted that Gu's son had been abducting people on the streets, and asked if Gu thought one apology was enough to resolve that. Gu bowed to the people around him, and explained that they were disciples of his faction, which had a long history. He promised to offer 200 tolls of sterling silver the following day, as compensation, asking if they could forgive his son for his reckless behavior. The girl told the boy that Gu had identified them, and wondered if this was a threat. The boy thought that, on the other hand, Yen City was under Gu's control, and they really couldn't do anything to him. They both then showed respect, saying that Gu was being kind, and since they had just arrived in Yan City, they might have made some mistakes. The others, who were hiding, wondered about the people Gu's son had harmed. They murmured that it wasn't the first time this had happened, and it was best to stay away from such trouble. Xiao Mu called out to Gua, asking if he really thought that paying some money and offering an apology would make everything go away. He seemed quite familiar with this tactic, and Chelmu suspected that Gua was simply trying to clean up his son's mess. But his son had made the guards whip people, and had abducted someone publicly before. What about the people he had killed or injured? How would Gua compensate for that? Cao Mo firmly believed that the son must pay with his life. Go realized that Cao Mo wasn't going to listen, and this was turning into a difficult situation. He asked that what he must do for him to release his son. Cao Mo replied coldly that it was simple, and he will only release his son when he was dead. An injured woman explained that Xiao Mu was just a passerby, yet he was willing to stand up for justice and sacrifice his life. Go commented that it seemed there was no more room for discussion. An attack had already been made on Xiao Mu, but first they decided to take the young master back and tie Xiao Mu's hands behind his back. Despite the pain, Kiol Mu felt a strange sense of satisfaction. As the decorations were being placed, Google approached him and asked for his name. Xiao Mu introduced himself, saying that no one was supporting him, so they might as well just kill him. He thought that Gu should go ahead and do it. After all, what was he waiting for? Gu acknowledged that Xiao Mu was a daring individual, then asked Haven released. Xiao Mu was not pleased with this and was skeptical of Gu's words. Gu praised him, stating that Xiao Mu was certainly no ordinary man. He then offered Xiao Mu a chance to join his army and serve the country, inviting him to report to his estate at any time. Xiao Mu felt disheartened, as his plan had not worked out as he had hoped. As Gu turned to leave, his son called out to him. Gu slapped his son harshly, then restrained him before ordering the guards to take him away. As they were leaving, Gu once again told Xiao Mu that if he was interested, he was welcome to seek him out anytime. Xiao Mu felt completely broken. People started to gather, and one person commented that Gu's son was spoiled, but at least Gu himself seemed to have some sense. Another person mentioned that Lord Go was very forgiving, and Xiao Mu was lucky to have been recognized by him. If he joined the army, his life would be set. Xiao Mu cried loudly, reflecting on how long he had been caught up in this situation. The atmosphere was perfect for a final moment, and he had even prepared his last words. Yet here he was still alive. He realized that despite being surrounded by evil people, they hadn't killed him. His thankfulness rating was still at a C+, and he thought the immobilization lock wasn't quite complete, meaning his death rating was still increasing. Even after Lord Gu had left, his death rating hadn't reset. He wondered if he died here, would he still get a relatively high rating? Why was it like this? Was he any different from who he had been before? As the crowd cheered for him, he realized that if he died now, he would be remembered as the hero who stopped the Lord's son from being spoiled. Not just some random boy. This was the correct way to use the system. As long as he made a name for himself, he would gain fame and recognition. When he finally died, he would die stronger. If he failed to die while challenging someone, his death rating would only increase. No matter the outcome, whether he died or survived, he would win, and when he did eventually die, it would be a high quality, epic death, possibly even SSS rated while he was lost. In thought, the people around him looked at him in confusion. The scene shifted to Gu, where his son was sitting nearby being treated. His son asked why Gu was recruiting Kyo-Mu instead of giving him a lesson. Go replied, telling his son to stop worrying about Kyo-Mu. He reflected that when Kyo-Mu had been captured, the expressions on his men's faces showed just how much the disobedient son of his had accumulated hate in Yen City. If Go had killed Kyo-Mu in front of them, his image as a benevolent lord would have instantly crumbled. It was much better to recruit Kyo-Mu, claim the people's approval, and win their favor. Go then told his son that he was disobedient and had long deserved a lesson. If he didn't change his ways, he would eventually get into serious trouble. For the next month, he was strictly forbidden from stepping outside the estate. When his son asked why, Go explained that the king might visit the city soon, and keeping his son inside the estate was a way to prevent him from getting himself killed. His son asked how reliable Gu's source was about the Crimson Emperor. Gu wondered how the emperor could know so much about their situation, and he was concerned about what kind of assassins the emperor's actions might attract. He then asked whether Kyo-Mu would accept Gu's invitation to join their city's army. Gu wasn't sure if Kyo-Mu would agree, but he knew he had his ways of dealing with him. If Kyo-Mu did join, it would be easy. After all, there were plenty of thieves in the eastern mountains, so Kyo-Mu could be sent there to deal with them. Kyo-Mu was sitting on the roof of a house watching the snowfall. He wondered why Gu's son had been beaten, yet Gu still wanted him to join their army. Something was off. Kyo-Mu replied that this was exactly why he was going. Snow, who had been watching, pulled out a book from inside her clothes and said that, since Gao Mei was so insistent on doing something, that would probably get him killed. She had a secret art to offer him. Chao Mu, intrigued, eagerly watched as she took out the book and tried to sniff. Out of curiosity, Snow explained that it was the secret martial arts collection of the Chao family, a technique that could grant explosive power and potentially double his aura, but at the cost of tearing his muscles apart. Chao Mu immediately recognized it as the celestial demon dismantling technique, a powerful and dangerous skill. Snow told him that before he could use the celestial demon dismantling technique, he needed to first train and build his aura. His way and actions already reflected the spirit of great warriors, and his mindset resonated well with martial arts, so it was reasonable to believe he would improve faster than the average person. However, Smelly hadn't given him the techniques that he would recklessly sacrifice himself. Rather, she hoped it would give him a better chance of surviving. Chao Mu agreed with her and, filled with excitement, eagerly looked at the book, ready to begin his training. The scene shifted to the Yen City army camp, where Chou Mu was practicing with a spear. He thought to himself that throughout history, spear users were often marked with E-rank luck, making them more prone to an early death. He hoped this would serve as a good omen. One of the men nearby commented that Kyomui seemed average, likely still in the strength training stage. Another man noted that a Class 9 warrior with aura could potentially become a centurion, and wondered what Kyomui had within him. Someone else guessed that Kimu's boldness in standing up to the Lord's son had earned him some fame, and that Lord Gul, being forgiving, praised his courage and made an exception for him. A third person teased that they should just wait and see. Saomyo wouldn't last long on the harsh battleground. Meanwhile, Saomyo was meditating, trying to master a new skill, wondering when he would die and level up. A man approached him and said he had heard that Saomyo wanted to buy some martial arts books. Saomyo agreed, addressing him as Mr. Yellow, and asked if he could get the books. The man introduced himself as Mr. White. Two other men arrived, laughing and calling the man Mr. Yellow because his teeth were yellow, unlike theirs which were white. The first man, clearly annoyed, shot back that he didn't have time for their teasing. He then turned to Kilmo, offering him a physical technique and asking if he was interested. Kilmo thought that he hadn't obtained the technique yet, but it sounded like a good idea to learn a physical technique to enhance his abilities. Just then another man approached and suggested that Chimu should first ask what the physical skill Mr. Yellow was referring to before making any decisions. When Chimu inquired, the man explained that it was the iron crotch technique. Chimu's interest grew. He was eager to research various martial arts, and he would definitely take the iron crotch technique. He then asked the man for the price. He thought to himself that the crotch area was a weak point in the human body, so it made sense to protect it well. The man assured him not to worry about the cost, saying that the iron crotch technique was a gesture of respect. He then pulled out a book, and just as he was about to hand it over, he suddenly seemed to sense something. He turned and looked behind him, then told Cao Mu that 4 months ago, his pregnant wife had been whipped by the young master, causing her to lose the baby. While his wife managed to survive, she was still very weak. The man knelt before Cao Mu asking for vengeance, saying he owed Cao Mu one. Cao Mu responded that he hadn't done it for favors, and wouldn't take the technique from him. Out of gratitude, he assured the man that he would repay him in the future. The man got back up, stating that this was his way of repaying Cao Mu. He then led Cao Mu, mentioning that Lieutenant Su was calling for him. Cao Mu entered a tent to meet with a man who began speaking urgently. He explained that on the East Mountain, there was a savage man named Song He. Known as the Thief King, the man was nothing more than a mere thief, yet he had the audacity to call himself a king, which was nothing short of a joke. The man was furious as he told Chikamu that Song He had stolen silver from the imperial court, along with countless other valuables. There was no evil he wouldn't commit. Stationed on the East Mountain, Song He was responsible for hundreds of crimes in just half a year. He was extremely lustful and had kidnapped many fine women. Some of the lucky ones who were kidnapped by him eventually managed to return, but the unlucky ones died in his hideout, their bodies thrown into pigsties. Chow Mao was equally furious, and declared that this thief was no better than a beast, and needed to be eliminated. They had to do something about it. The man agreed, telling Cao Mao that he had prepared an army of 1,000 men. In 5 days they would march to attack Sun He. He had heard that Kyomiu was exceptionally courageous, so he wanted him to lead the charge in the battle. He asked how Chimu felt about this. Chimu, after considering the offer, accepted it as he left the tent. He thought about the 1,000-man army, which included 10 centurions. Aside from him, all the others were Class 9 warriors. Yet, despite being relatively inexperienced, he had been chosen to lead the charge. The man had even said that Xiao Mu was contagious, though he believed that was a foolish reason. Still, it must be part of some scheme devised by Lord Guo. Xiao Mu felt that this was finally his chance to die and level up. He couldn't help but feel excited about the upcoming battle. Meanwhile, the man watched him leave from inside the tent, wondering if Kyomu was simply naive, or actually so confident in his abilities. He thought to himself that he needed to be careful, not to mess up the orders given by the Lord. 5 days later, at the eastern mountain where Cao had been observing from the cliff, the scene shifts. A man stood behind him, and remarked that he was quite familiar with the area. He suggested they head forward, as they had yet to find any trace of the thieves. They were most likely hiding in the valley to the west. He added that if they moved westward for a bit, they would encounter a small valley. Xiao Mu agreed and told the man to be cautious. He instructed him that if anything went wrong, to immediately hide behind him. The man replied that Kalmu was the kindest person he had ever met and assured him he wouldn't be a burden. Kalmu, however, reminded him that it was an order. He thought to himself that this might finally be his chance to die, and he couldn't let the man ruin that opportunity. The man then asked if my son was so strong. He can lift a 150-kilogram stone and he's only 15 years old. What were he like when he was 15? Kamu replied drily that when he was 15 he was killed by Butcher Jen. The man made a strange face, prompting Kamu to snap shut up and LED the way. They sat down for dinner, but suddenly a rain of arrows shot toward them. The man threw himself to the ground for cover, while Chao Mu used his spear to block the incoming projectiles. He muttered, "Tornado decimates trailer parks," just as he realized those TV shows were all fake. Then several men rushed toward them with swords drawn, intending to attack Mr. Yellow. Frightened, realized that these were the thieves. Chao Mu sensed that his time was coming to an end. The immortality lock began to glow again, and it seemed that the harder he fought, the higher his death rating became. No one could stop his inevitable death. He charged toward the thieves, shouting for his men to follow him. The battle raged on as Cao mutated arrows aimed at him, but he kept fighting. One of the men remarked that Xiao Mu was brutal against the enemies. When the battle ended, Xiao Mu pulled the arrows from his body and asked for medicine to stop the bleeding. Miss Yellow knelt before him and said that he blocked 3 arrows for him, and he have nothing to repay him. As Chaomi was treated, he muttered that the thieves had been weak, and though he had hoped to die, he would certainly try harder next time. A bald man then asked that was it how he repay Mr. Yellow. Mr. Yellow was shocked but also pleased with Chaomi's words. Chaomi wondered if they had something to give him in return. The bald man replied that he hadn't brought it with him, but promised to give it to Xiao Meiwu as soon as they returned to the town. He added a general willing to seal his soldiers was rare these days, and Miss Yellow's life was in his hands. Xiao Mu told Mr. Yellow not to worry about repaying him, and that they should focus on getting rid of the thieves first. He then glanced toward the valley and remarked that, although the valley was narrow, the trees inside were tall. It seemed likely that the thieves had set traps and ambushes ahead, so continuing forward would be dangerous. Xiao Mu then asked Miss Yellow if the valley had a name. When Michello denied it, Xiao Mu named it himself, the Valley of the Fallen Tree. He thought to himself that now more than ever, he wondered if this would be the place where he would finally meet his end. Mr. Jello, somewhat puzzled, asked were they here to fight or were they on vacation. Just then General Lu arrived on horseback, asking why Kyo Mui hadn't LED the way as he had been instructed. Gao Mu replied that they had just been ambushed by the thieves, and ahead was a valley where more ambushes were likely waiting. Lu raised his voice in anger, saying that it was Gao Mu's responsibility to lead them, and that it was none of his concern. He added that if it really was an ambush, they would assist him, but Aquibius Kyomu, of either being afraid of battle or refusing orders. Kyomu thought it would be better to comply, as refusing would result in Leo killing him immediately. To complete the task for their lord, Reluctantly he agreed to lead them forward, all thinking that he was thankful to Lu. At least for now, from that point, they would be good brothers. But dying for not obeying an order from Class 8 would be humiliating. If he leveled up, he vowed that he would get revenge on Lu. As they continued forward, the thieves appeared once again. Miss Yellow remarked that there were thousands of thieves, and they didn't have enough people to fight back. Chao Mu asked if they were just waiting for their deaths, and told them to move away from the area as they tried to retreat. They saw Chao Mu fiercely battling the thieves, buying enough time for them to escape. Chao Yu ordered them to leave and not return, his voice firm and commanding. They were confused, unsure of what to do. Just then General Lu shouted from the top of a cliff, warning them not to run or he would kill them all. Chao Mu thought grimly to himself that if his soldiers ran, they would die alongside him. But then Yellow and the others charged toward the thieves, to fight alongside Chao Mu. As Yellow was about to charge, Chao Mu stopped him, asking if he wanted his wife to become a widow and his children to grow up without a father. Yellow, however, responded that they wouldn't let Chao Mu die alone. Chao Mu charged forward, determined to kill the thieves. He told them if they don't want to die, don't give him that nonsense. He will be the one to die first. He pushed through the thieves, battling with them fiercely. As he fought, he declared that the things they can't do, he will do. They won't die today, and he will die for them. He kept taking arrows, and a few thieves leaped forward to attack him. After Kuomu killed a thief by attacking its private area, he stepped back, blending all the themes, and told them not to be cowards, challenging them to come at him. He anticipated more to attack, and felt a certain strength grown within him. As he continued battling the thieves, Chou Mu sensed something emerging within him. He pushed back the attackers coming from behind. Lu watched in awe, thinking that Chou Mu had acquired a powerful aura. A warrior who could achieve such power by the age of 20 must be incredibly gifted. Lu calculated how many more blows Kyomu could withstand before he fell. Just then a sword was thrown at Kyomu, but he used his spear to block it. Lu realized that Kyomu had revealed his strength, and surmised that it was some form of explosive martial art. Lu understood that Chimu had used the Celestial Demand technique, a deadly move with no turning back. It was clear now that Chimu was doomed. Chimu drove his spear into the ground, exerting pressure on the thieves to make them retreat. Even his army could feel the weight of the force. Chimu declared that as long as he stood there, no one would dare to cross his line. The thieves charged at him again, wild and relentless, but he countered their attacks with precise spear strikes. As he was killing one after another, more thieves attacked him from behind. Yellow and the others watched in horror as the scene unfolded. Despite sustaining multiple brutal attacks, Kyomu managed to defeat his assailants, and stood triumphant atop a mountain of corpses. Noticing his weakened state, Lu and the rest began approaching, and Lu called out for Chao Mu to clear a path, so they could join the fight without leaving him behind. However, when Lu reached Chao Mu, he discovered that his comrade had fallen. Declaring the mission over, Lu ordered everyone to return to the city. Yellow was shocked and protested, insisting that they had only eliminated a few thieves, and had not even dismantled the enemy base. Lu explained that the treacherous mountain terrain left them no alternative, and demanded that they follow his orders. As they retreated, Yellow wondered why Lu had launched such a risky attack, seemingly sacrificing Cao Meiu in the process. In the end, they resolved that what was done, and decided to retrieve Cao Meiu's body, believing his family deserved closure, especially since he had only a blind sister. Yellow gently covered Kyomu's body, praying that he might finally rest in peace. But then, to everyone's astonishment, Kyomu was resurrected. Checking his stats, he was thrilled to see that his death rating had reached B class, a remarkable boost in mastery achieved with just one death, considering that AC class death might take 10 years of full dedication. Earning a B class death, which would normally require 20 years at 150% effort, was nothing short of extraordinary. He then wondered what the rating of an A class would be like. He stabbed an ant that was crawling on the tree, and thought about how high quality brought so many additional benefits. Now he would have to thank Lu, who had killed him. Lu, writing his course, remarked that it was getting cold. Quickly, as they were moving along, he noticed the words written on a tree by Xiao Mei, and finally understood what they meant. Yellow explained that it was the phrase Valley, the fallen tree, and that it had been written by Xiao Mu. The bald man started crying, saying that Xiao Mu had suspected an ambush before entering, but he couldn't refuse the order. Perhaps Xiao Mu had known he was going to die. Yellow added that Xiao Mu had sacrificed himself for that cause. Just then Lu saw a dead body being carried by Yellow and the others, and he asked what they were carrying. Yellow started crying, warning the loss of Gao Mu, referring to him as Bi and pointing to his body. As Lu approached, Yellow's thoughts were clouded with anger and confusion. Lu explained that Kumu had died valiantly while fighting the thieves, and that his body should not be left exposed in the wild. He promised that once they returned to Yen City, he would personally handle the funeral arrangements for Kumu. Yellow, however, believed that it was all Lu's fault. Lu, on the other hand, thought to himself that Xiao Mu had taken down many enemies, but all the credit would fall to Lu. He should be thankful for that. He hoped that more of these hot-headed young recruits would join the army, now that the order from the Lord was complete, and the young master was satisfied. Lu intended to leave the corpse to them for disposal, perhaps even receiving a promotion from the Lord. Then he thought about Chao Mi's sister, whom he would now have to take care of. But suddenly Chao Mu, standing at the top of the mountain, threw his spear, aiming to stab Lu in the neck and kill him. The army quickly realized they were under attack. Yellow turned to the bald man beside him, asking if he had seen the shadow on the mountain. They both stared at Kal Mu's dead body, and confirmed that it had been a thief's ambush. The soldiers began fleeing, shouting that the thieves were back, and that they were stronger than before. Kal Mu, hiding behind a stone in a distance, thought to himself that the situation was insane. Lu was in a Class 8 warrior, and he had even sensed Kal Mu's attack. After experiencing a B-class death, Kal Mu now felt capable of surpassing Class 8. He had also learned to control the celestial demon, dismantling technique which he used. The moment he released his spear, the result was a broken arm, but it didn't kill him. Such self-sacrificing one-shot skills were made for him. It even killed Lu. But now the soldiers would undoubtedly search for the killer, and Kel Mui would surely die again. However, as he observed the soldiers running away, he was infuriated by their actions, as they were completely opposite to what he had anticipated. Then he heard Yellow's voice calling for a retreat, and Cho Mu thought to himself that he had sacrificed his life for them, and now they wouldn't let him die in peace. With everyone yelling and believing that the thieves had killed Lu, instead of him, he wondered how he could increase his rating. Meanwhile, the thieves were still around, which was convenient for him. He called out to them, telling them they had only retreated to ambush him. He challenged them to come at him and learn the secrets of the Chao family's training. He refused to bow down. Chao Mu realized he was already half paralyzed and an easy target, so it would be simple for them to kill him now. But those thieves reminded Chao Mu of how he was killed earlier, and they referred to him as a ghost. One of them even asked it. Didn't he die earlier, so why wasn't he wounded? He rushed for them quickly, telling them not to be afraid, as he was already dead and was now in his brother's avenger. One thief asked what he was saying. Chao Mu replied that they had killed his brother, and he was there to avenge him. Another thief turned to the others and commented, Chao Mu really looks older, and he's the one who killed our captain. The second thief doubted, asking if they truly believed him. Since Chao Mi was the first to seek their lives, the thieves started running away, begging him not to follow and to spare their lives. Just then they saw their boss and called out for help, warning them that there was a ghost behind them. When Chao Mi saw the Thief King, he decided to leave the other thieves behind and focus on attacking the Thief King. He thought that being killed by the thieves would earn him a B-class rating, but if he were killed by the Thief King, he was certain it would be an A-class rating. He called out to the Thief King, declaring he was there to avenge his brother. The Thief King slammed his leg into the ground, and Chao Mu wondered if this really was the third king. His head was still hidden, but he laughed and addressed Chao Mu as a warrior. Then he stepped forward, greeting Chao Mu and introducing himself as Song. He leaned against a tree for support, trying to clear the blood from his mouth. Kuomu wondered if the leader of the thieves was the weak scholar, and if he was faking his condition. One of the thieves informed the leader that Xiao Mu was the brother of Centurion Xiao, and mentioned that he had also killed Lu Song. He slightly responded by acknowledging that Centurion Xiao was a brave man, one whom he respected. He went on to say that since Gao Mu had killed Lu as well, it showed that he was both clever and brave. He then offered Gao Mu the opportunity to join their East Mountain group and achieve great things during these chaotic times. Gao Mu wondered aloud if Song He wanted to recruit him, asking if he wasn't afraid that Gao Mu would seek revenge for his brother's death. So he smiled and replied that with all the killing going on in the world, it was difficult to distinguish what was right and wrong. Xiao Mu didn't think much of this response. He agreed that Song He was right, but then became enraged, insisting that a great warrior should live without regret. How could he waste his life robbing people and hiding in the mountains? Cao Mu believed that the thieves could continue their way of life, but they should stop trying to brainwash him into becoming a mindless killer. He suspected they saw him only as a tool for death, so he thought they might just want to kill him. As he looked at the other thieves glaring at him in anger, he realized they were furious and would likely try to attack him. Xiao Mu understood their anger. He knew they would come at him soon. Sally interrupted, telling Xiao Mu to stop, and then asked why he hadn't tried to guess how so many thieves ended up in this place. Xiao Mu replied that the governors of Yen City were like wolves, working together, which was why Song He had escaped. There he then reminded Song He that at one point, he himself had been a beggar. Song He reflected, wondering if the governors were like tigers, and he admitted that it was wise and difficult to survive in such chaotic times. He explained that the mountains serve as a safe haven, built on the courage of its warriors. Though formless, the courage of the warriors drove away attackers, breaking their spines. Song He smiled, wishing to be the man who protected the mountain. He asked Xiao Mu again if he was willing to join him and fight for a better life for the people. Xiao Mu, making eye contact, refused. He acknowledged that Song He's words were impressive, but whether an army or just a group of thieves depended not on what they said, but on what they did. Song He suggested that Xiao Mu come and see their base for himself. Xiao Yu agreed, thinking that even though Song He was recruiting him, if he went to their base and still refused, they would likely not let him leave alive. He felt as if he were walking toward his death. After a 15-minute walk, they reached the base. Looking at it, Xiao Yu remarked that it resembled more of a villa than a thief's lair. He saw elders and children there as well, so he asked Song He about them. Song He replied that all those people were Horlicks, people them had met and brought to their base for refuge. He explained that the flourishing appearance of Yen City was merely a facade created by Lord Gua, who had removed many of the elderly and weak from the city. However, the suffering of the people was not solely Lord Gu's fault. After His Highness lost the war, the Crimson faction had become obsessed with seeking divine favor, causing those under its rule to step out of line. Xiao Mu mentioned that he had heard of the divine before, and asked Song He to explain more. Song He noted that Xiao Mu seemed to use the immortality punch, and was a descendant of the Xie family. Wondering if he had never seen the divine himself, Xiao Mu grew excited upon realizing that Song He knew about the immortality punch. He eagerly asked if Song He was also part of the martial arts faction. Song He laughed, explaining that while the immortality punch was indeed unique, it wasn't just the martial arts faction that could recognize his fighting style. He then suggested they continue their conversation in private. The two entered a secluded room where Song He pointed to a statue, saying that it represented the divine being. Xiao Mei was puzzled, wondering if Song He was referring to the statue itself. Song He shook his head and clarified that the statue merely depicted someone who trained to become a divine being. Kyo Mu slowly began to understand the world around him. He felt as if he had wasted his time training as a warrior, instead of a sage realizing that there was still a significant gap in skill between warriors and sages. He also wondered if his iron crotch technique would hold up in a real battle. Song He explained that divine beings and humans were of the same race, but the divine beings were too proud to acknowledge. They hired humans to farm divine plants and gather believers for support, but they never truly blessed the people. Instead, they saw humans as mere tools, and if humans didn't obey, they would be killed instantly. The funniest part, Song He added, was that many humans didn't even realize this, and would spend their entire lives working for the divine beings. Kaomyu tried to imagine it, and realized it seemed like a capitalist system. He felt as though he had already experienced this in his previous world, and it started to make him angry. The greater the profit, the greater the risk. If he wanted to achieve the highest rewards, it seemed like he would have to challenge a divine being. He thought about trying it, and wondered what the system would say if he fought a divine being. Without further thought, he leaped toward the statue to strike. Song he puzzled. Asked what he was doing. Chao Mu replied that he was born free, and no one would dare act so mighty and high. He intended to break the divine statue, daring them to strike him down with a single bolt of lightning. Song he threw his sword to block Kyo Mui's punch aimed at the statue. As he relaxed, feeling the statue was safe, the sword struck the head of the statue instead and shattered. Kyo Mui, furious, demanded to know why Song. He had tried to stop him from dying. He confronted Song he asking, "Didn't he say the divine sages were evil? So why did he try to stop me?" He also asked about the sage skill that Song he had just used. Song he unknowingly, coughing up blood, wiped his mouth and explained that Kiamu had misunderstood. He clarified that he only practiced the sage fighting skill, but he was not trying to become a sage himself. He used the sage skill to counter the divine sages who, in his opinion, deserved to die. He hoped that one day there would be no more sages. However, he admitted that what Kyle Move had done was reckless. Breaking the divine statue might provoke revenge from the sages, or even divine punishment. Chao Mu replied nonchalantly, it was just the effect he was wishing for, and then added, so strike him down with a single beam of lightning. So he was bewildered, wondering why Xiao Mu wasn't listening to him. He shook his head, saying that he really was impossible. Blood began to drip from his eyes and mouth. As he continued telling Xiao Mu not to get too excited, he understood what Kikayamu meant, but he urged him to be more careful in the future. Song he then asked that since he using a sage skill to fight the sages, doesn't that mean he can't learn martial arts? He paused, reflecting on his own past. In the past, he never obtained a single sage skill. He muttered. Song he explained that martial arts emphasize one's body, while sage skills emphasize one's soul. If you had to compare them, the strongest sage and the strongest martial artist would be roughly equal in skill. However, he hadn't yet reached the pinnacle of martial arts, and technically there was no true pinnacle for martial arts. The divine sages were powerful not only because of their strength, but also due to their near immortality. Even if they faced death, a martial artist would eventually die of old age. On the other hand, the path to becoming a sage required immense talent, and was a slow process, often taking decades or even centuries of training. In contrast, the martial arts path was much faster. If more martial arts masters, especially the strongest ones, could break the barrier of mortality, they could defeat the divine sages. Chao Yu patted Song he reassuringly and told him to take it easy. He thought to himself that the immortality punch was the martial artist's solution. It was a family heirloom from the Snow family, and with the system by his side, Xiao Mu could become a martial arts master in mere time. With the immortality punch and the fact that he couldn't die, he essentially felt like he was already a divine being. Xiao Mu acted differently, asking how it would take 10,000 years to become a divine sage, when he would become one soon. Song he thought that Xiao Mu was losing his mind, and even feared that he might misjudge Xiao Mu's character. Xiao Mu then stepped closer and asked if Song he thought he had the talent to become a divine sage. He wondered if you should try to become one, thinking that only children made simple choices, and he wanted everything, so he pushed him away, telling him that without a soul root, he would have no chance of success. Kilmu glanced around and then whispered in Song He's ear, asking if mastering the iron crotch technique would commence. Having an iron soul root, Song he didn't understand at first, but then Xiao Mu demonstrated his technique, which shone brightly. Song he stepped back in shock, saying that he lacked the experience to help Kilmu and told him to hide it again. Turning away Song, he remarked that if Xiao Mu didn't have anything else to discuss, he could leave. Xiao Mu, curious, asked where Song he was going and why he wouldn't recruit him. Song he replied that he understood Xiao Mu wanted to change the world, but this small village wasn't the place for him. He added that Xiao Mu was too much of a brute, and if they kept him around, he would surely cause chaos. Xiao Mu then acted cute and said if they let him go, don't be afraid that you will expose the location of his base. Song he told Xiao Mu that he didn't seem like someone who would expose their base, and besides, they had already stirred the soldiers who would be moving soon anyway. Xiao Mu responded that he wouldn't bother Song he any longer. As he left, He thought that he would just take things one step at a time and head back to Yen City. If he got there quickly enough, perhaps he would make it in time to attend his own funeral. The scene shifted to the House of Snow, where the son of Lord Gu arrived with a few guards. He introduced himself as a guard of Lord Shipsun and revealed that they had come to offer their thanks on behalf of the Lord, acknowledging Kelmu's bravery during the battle. The boy thought that Snow was a fine woman, though he was aware she was blind. She then asked why Chiu Mu had not returned yet. The boy replied that Chiu Mu was gone. Snow stepped back asking what he meant. The boy reluctantly said that Xiao Mu was dead, but Snow refused to believe it, insisting that Xiao Mu wouldn't die so easily. As she attempted to close the door, the boy stopped her, apologizing and saying it was his mistake. He had already brought Kiyomi's body but had forgotten to mention it. He grabbed her hand and pulled her out, asking if she was truly his family, and if she could just help him verify if it was really him. Snow wondered what he was doing. The boy brought her face close to Kiyomi's lifeless body, explaining that since she couldn't see, he would describe it to her. He told her that all of Kiyomi's limbs were broken, and there were at least 50 wounds on his body. His face was horribly bloody, and even he couldn't bear to look at it. Snow pulled her hands back, stating that it was impossible. The boy insisted that it was absolutely true, and the corpse in the coffin was a fake. Everything was fake if she didn't believe him. Then how would she feel about her big brother telling her the truth? The bald man standing in the back grew angry, and muttered that they had gone too far, and that he was going to kill the son of Lord Gua. Yahello intervened, stopping him from doing anything rash. He told the bald man not to get so worked up, as there was nothing they could do now. All they could do was boast around for the time being. Once they left, Yahello and the bald man would go to help Snowbear Mu, and they would make sure to give her some money, so she could manage on her own. Deva leaned in close to Snow, asking if she would keep this a secret and if she wouldn't even cry. If that was the case, he had something else for her. He clapped his hands, signaling for the man with the soup to come forward. The boy then remarked that everyone had said Kiyomi was a brave warrior, so now they would see how good his liver soup would be. As Snow's anger started to rise, the boy ordered someone to feed her the soup. 2 men grabbed her hands, while a 3rd man brought a bowl close to her, intending to feed her. However, Yahello interrupted, claiming the soup was delicious. As he reached for it, the young master kicked him, and demanded to know how he dared to steal the food. The bald man supported Yahello, explaining that they were soldiers of Xiao Mu, and Yahello, a bit absent-minded and tended to eat everything. Sobi asked the young master not to take offense. Yahello spat out the soup, and the young master asked if he was done messing around just then. Kiyomiyu appeared, hiding his face, and commented that the soup smelled amazing. The young master turned, asking who he was and whether he couldn't see the young master. Kimu remarked again that the soup smelled wonderful, and wondered if he could have a bowl as well. Yahello referred to him as the boss, as he had done earlier. Everyone was shocked by this, and the young master insisted it was impossible. He then turned toward the corpse of Kelmu, confused by the sight of 2 bodies of the same person, one alive and the other dead. Kelmu stepped forward, holding the head in front of the young master's face, before crushing it with his spear. They were all shocked by what they saw, and the old man standing near the young master saved him by pushing Kelmu's spear aside. Yahello, observing the scene, muttered that maybe this wasn't the same person after all. The one before them seemed stronger compared to their boss, and was a bit more brutish. The old man questioned how Xiao Mu could still be alive. As he had already died, he noted that the mana aura wasn't very strong, probably no more than class 8, but wondered why this person was so powerful, and why he looked almost identical to Xiao Mu. The man then introduced himself as Cao Mui, and explained that the Cao Mui they knew was his brother. The old man was stunned by this revelation. Cao Mu demanded to know how they dared to disrespect his brother's remains, and warned that even if he had to die, he would bring them all down with him. The old man asked who Kalmu was to make such bold claims, but the young master, unfazed, turned to the old man and said they should leave, adding that they would return next time. The group departed, and as they left, Joe moving a small hit to his hand, contemplating that perhaps the young master would retreat to his estate, Gua, and would need to prepare for his death. Soon as they were leaving, Kuomyu declared the following day, he would burn his brother's remains on the mountain outside the town. The old man thought that Kuomyu was hinting at them, implying that he would be outside of the town, and they could challenge him. The next day Chao Nu walked away, complaining that he was hungry, and never imagined he would end up dealing with his brother's funeral. As he reached for the soup, Yahello interrupted, telling him to stop as it was made from his brother's remains. Chao Mu turned to him, and upon seeing him, Yahello immediately vomited. Chao Mu casually pulled the liver from his mouth, explaining that it was just pig liver, not what Yahello had assumed. He also mentioned that he had heard his brother had died tragically, with all his internal organs shattered, leaving little behind to make suit from. He muses that his brother had hidden himself so well. Just then Snow approached and touched him. With surprised Chao Mu, a scene shifted to the Gua estate, where the young master was telling his father that the ghost of Chao Mu had appeared. Go turn to him, and ask why he hadn't followed his orders to stay at home, and why he was always causing trouble. He then asked the old man Fu if he had been with the young master as well. The old man apologized and explained that they had merely come to offer their condolences to the family of Chao Mu. He added that the young master had seen someone who resembled Kumu, and claimed to be his brother, also named Kumu according to the old man's observation. The new Xiao Mu seemed taller and a little older. Gua then asked how strong the Xiao Lin was. The old man estimated that Xiao Lin was class 8, though he was injured, meaning he wasn't stronger than the most powerful class 9s, so there was no need to worry. Fu sighed, stating that Kiamiu was dead and now this situation was simple. The emperor was coming, and Gua would be too busy to deal with such small matters. He then told the old man to handle it, and reminded him that if they didn't kill them all, one day they would come back to haunt him. The old man agreed. Snow approached Kiamiu and began to smell him. He wondered what she was doing, and told her that he was already 28 years old, had 13 concubines, 18 weapons, 36 martial art styles and vast lands, so she should stay away from him. Just then the bald man in yellow arrived, handing him a pouch of money. Xiao Mei asked if it was really from the city governor, and whether it was truly from him. Yahello hesitated before agreeing, and Kyomui understood that it was actually her money. He then returned the money, saying there was no need for it, and he didn't care for such money from the governor. The bald man then offered Kyomui his martial arts book, explaining that if he didn't want the money, he should take the book instead. He reminded Kuomyu of the promise he had made, that if he returned to Yen City safely, he would give Kuomyu the martial arts guide as a token of gratitude. Chao Mu accepted the book, thinking it was just another basic skill guide, but one he should learn nonetheless. As the two men left, Chao Mu told Snow that he had often heard about her from his brother. He mentioned that he would duel the Lord to the death the next day, and hoped she would leave soon, so she wouldn't be affected by the battle. She continued to smell him, and he remarked that she was playing with fire. He added that he had mastered the iron crotch technique, so she should consider whether she could really handle him. She sat closer, telling him to stop pretending she could see through his scent voice, the way he spoke and the pace at which he walked. All of it confirmed what she already knew. He was Chao Mao. Sasuke remarked that it seemed like she truly needed some skills to live alone. As a blind person, he then asked if her surname really wasn't Ning. She quickly realized that it was indeed Chao Mao, not someone else. They both sat down and she questioned how he managed to fool others. He replied that while fighting with some thieves, he had been badly injured and captured by the enemy. They must have thought he was dead. But then he met Song He, a sage who saved him and helped him deceive them. She understood now. She remembered telling him when she was younger that someone had wanted her to be the sage's disciple. He then mentioned that the Cao family was a martial family that refused to accept other fighting styles. Asked if he recognized the sages now, she stood up with the help of her cane, declaring that she could be a sage herself. He responded, repeating the familiar story, that her family had died and she was seeking revenge. She stood before him and explained that everyone in the city was under the control of the Lord, a class 6 warrior with several thousand men at his command. She heard Yen recently advanced to class 8 and had lost most of his aura due to the celestial demon dismantling technique. She added that he wouldn't win, and asked him to stop and let her take over. He wondered aloud if she was trying to steal his death wish. She realized then that although she'd harbored the will for revenge, she lacked the strength to carry it out. She offered him her technique so he could fight for her. Though she wouldn't be able to see the outcome, she knew that if she didn't give it her all, there was no chance of success. So she decided that she would leave Yen City the next day to seek the path of a sage. She asked him not to go any further with his fight against Lord Gua. Even though he had almost died for her, she had nothing to offer in return. She decided to give him the Ripple Inner Strength technique, a powerful technique that could project multiple views of inner strength and stack them, creating an explosion of power beyond his normal potential. He became excited upon hearing about it. Snow continued explaining that it was the ultimate secret technique of the Chao family, and her last remaining book of secret techniques. Xiao Mu became emotional at the sight of tears welling up as he took the book from her. She wondered what was happening with him, and told him that he didn't mean to react like that. He agreed, admitting that he hadn't expected such a promise, and that there were words he had longed to hear. She wondered what he meant by that. After a moment he clenched his fist, and told her that they now both had a path to follow. He would carve out his own path, and wouldn't give up until he reached his goal. She paused for a while, before telling him that she would wait for him at the temple, outside the town for 7 days. If he didn't show up, she trailed off, but then added that when he did come, they would travel together. He left thinking that he was burying himself, and it was a strange freeing feeling. He was carrying the ashes of Chimu, and reflecting on how Chimu had left him all alone in the world. How could he live now? The old man from the Yen state was watching from a distance, crying. Just as he prepared to attack, Kaiamu threw the ashes into the old man's eyes, and the old man exclaimed that those ashes were from his brother. Kaiamu replied they were working as a team. Then, without hesitation, he stabbed the old man, thinking that it seemed like the system recognized his actions, and you would have to try harder. The old man, enraged, shouted that Kyomui was just a kid of class A, and even a blind man could defeat him. He attacked and threw Kyomui off a cliff. As he fell, Kyomui even thanked him. The old man remarked that Kyomui had dared to stand up against the Lord, and it was clear what the outcome would be for him. As he turned to leave, he saw a more mature Cao Mu standing there, smiling and asking how the man dared to attack the Cao family. The old man was slightly taken aback, but responded, mentioning that fortunately, he had arrived early enough to avoid facing him. Cao Mu then approached with the celestial demon dismantling technique, and delivered a powerful kick to the old man. The old man recognized the technique and with a smirk, asked if the entire Xiao family had a death wish. Even with the technique, Xiao Mu was still no more than a class A, and would be easily killed by him. He killed him swiftly and tossed his body into the cliffs, certain that was the end of it. However, Kiyomi returned carrying Sakura's body, and greeted the old man, who was left in shock. Sakura spoke, saying they had met again, causing many questions to race through the old man's mind. Was Kyle Mu a ghost, a sibling, a sage? He wondered if he was even still conscious. His stomach ached from the earlier blow delivered by Kyle Mu, confirming that it hadn't been an illusion. Sakura prepared to attack, and the old man, in disbelief, asked if Kyle Mu thought he could vibrate the air to escape. He was testing the mental resilience of the old man. Without hesitation, Sakura launched an attack, using the celestial demon dismantling technique, once again aiming to strike the old man. The old man asked why Qiu Ming's entire family always resorted to the celestial demon dismantling technique, and whether they all had a death wish. He scolded them for not understanding human nature. The old man shoved Kyomi back and then prepared to attack Sakura again. Aiming to bring him down, Sakura responded by saying, "Let's meet again later." The old man muttered that it must be an illusion, and that everything was fake. However, Kyumu returned once again, this time with another body, and used the celestial demon dismantling technique on the old man. The old man shouted for him to stop messing with him, and attacked Chao Mu repeatedly. Chao Mu thought to himself that the old man was truly a master. Being killed by him would boost his rating to C, and there would be bountiful rewards. But sadly, his last death had lowered his score to D. It seemed like the system had caught on to his pattern of griming deaths. The old man, who had broken Xiao Mei's spear on their first encounter, pushed him back again. Xiao Mei realized that, since the old man was no longer of any use to him, and had made it clear he was determined to kill him, he decided to stab the sharp point of his spear into the old man. "You won't spare him anymore," Xiao Mu declared even as the old man spat blood. He threw Xiao Mu into the cliff once again, muttering that no matter whether they were the same person or a ghost, he would always hunt him down. Yet again Xiao Mei returned, this time with another body, and grabbed the old man from behind. "My deaths have been updated," he said with a cold smile. Xiao Mei took the old man and jumped off. Holding him tightly, the old man begged to be let go, struggling desperately to break free. But Xiao Mu captured him with a firm grip, saying, "Even without my hands, he still have my feet to keep him from escaping." The old man, growing weaker and drowsy, could feel himself drifting into unconsciousness. Just before hitting the ground, he saw 4 more of Xiao Mu's dead bodies, and realized there was more to this situation than he initially thought. As they hit the ground, the wolves, sensing the impending feast, seemed to think it was a blessing from the heavens, food falling from the sky. The old man died in Sheol Mu. Now with a new body, declared that the mission was accomplished. As he checked his stats, he frowned in confusion. His rating was still only D and his skills had barely improved. He meditated, using his power to focus. He realized he was only in the middle of Class 8 and still couldn't manipulate his aura at will. The higher the class, the more difficult it became to advance. Suddenly a system notification appeared, revealing that his hidden reward had been activated, the ability to choose his spawn point. He was elated, realizing this new skill would allow him to spawn in locations where his enemies wouldn't expect, offering him more opportunities. With such a valuable skill, he decided to test it out and head toward the Lord's estate. But first he would need to return to the city, change his clothes, and make sure the Lord paid for his trouble. The scene shifts to the Gua State kitchen, where people were enjoying their soup. Suddenly Xiao Mu crashed through the window, mentioning that he had been revived many times but never celebrated. Now, however, he had the chance to eat something nice. As he was eating, he noticed the sunrise outside. Curious, he checked and saw that the young master, accompanied by a clever dog, was aware of the delicious food in the kitchen. Kilmo thought that if he were discovered now, he would be caught immediately, and there might be guards just outside his line of sight. He wondered why he felt so fearful. The young master knocked on the kitchen door, asking if the people inside were deaf as they hadn't opened the door. When he saw the dog barking, he remarked that the dog only knew how to eat. Just then a hand reached from inside to pull him in, and the situation unfolded without the young master fully understanding what was going on. As the young master fell, he got up and ordered the dog to fight with Xiao Mu. However, he soon found that the dog was actually playing with Xiao Mu. Xiao Mu, holding a spear close to him, instructed the young master to remain silent and answer his questions. First he asked how many classes of warriors there were. The young master, frightened, replied that his father was a Class 6 warrior, and there were 2 Class 7 warriors. One of the Class 7 warriors, an old man, had gone out to kill Xiao Mu just now, and the other Class 7 warrior was Ju-1. There were roughly 5 or 6 Class 8 warriors, and he didn't know about the Class 9s. Kuomyu still kept the spear pointed at him, asking if he knew anything about the martial arts factions, or the plans of the Crimson Emperor. The boy, confused, asked why Kuomyu wanted to know. Xiao Mu glared at him, telling him to answer quietly. The boy, nervous, replied that his father had mentioned the Crimson Empire might arrive in town within a month or so. Xiao Mu asked for the exact time and location. The boy hesitated, thinking that if he answered, Kuomyu would certainly kill him. He needed to get Kuomyu out of the kitchen and take him to Gua. However, he mentioned that he wasn't sure about the exact details, but could take Kuomyu to his father's study room, where there was a secret letter. Kalmu understood that the boy was trying to lead him to the Lord, and while he was concerned the boy might not take action, he wasn't going to let him off easily. He accused the boy of trying to trick him, and threatened to kill him right then and there, planning to go alone to find the secret letter. As Kalmu glared at him, the boy, trembling with fear, quickly spoke up, saying that not only could he lead Kalmu to the letter, but he also knew where his father hid the manual for the ultimate technique. The boy promised to give both to Kalmu if he spared his life. Xiao Mu asked the boy how to get closer to the technique. The boy explained that the manual was called A Guide to Legendary Martial Arts Mastery, and his father often practiced with it, claiming it was incredibly powerful. Hearing this, Kalmu became excited and immediately pulled the boy to his feet, demanding that he lead the way. He warned the boy not to try any tricks. They made their way to Gu's study room, when the boy searched for the items he had mentioned earlier. As the boy handed them to Gao Mu, Chao Mu wondered why something so important wasn't even locked away. The boy replied that no one dared enter the study without Gu's permission. Except for him, Chao Mu checked the items, and upon examining the manual, he realized it didn't focus on the techniques or breathing, but rather on cultivating mystical techniques, practicing intuition and anticipating moves. He didn't understand any of it, so he pointed the spear at the boy, asking why the book was so thin and if it was really the whole manual. The boy, clearly nervous, suggested that the rest might be in his father's forbidden room, urging Xiao Mu to come with him. Xiao Mu warned him not to trick him. The boy reluctantly agreed, and they left the study room together. As they walked, the boy thought to himself that Xiao Mu was following closely behind. He knew that if he tried anything, Xiao Mu would surely kill him. He couldn't see the boy's expression, but he suspected that there might still be a way to get rid of him. His only hope was that his father and Zhu Wen could save him. Only they had the power to protect him in the entire city. Xiao Mei was folding his hand back, driving it forward, while the boy thought that, as long as his father wasn't in the study room, and he could get to the forbidden room, he would surely be saved. Just then, he saw Zhu Wen passing by. Upon noticing the boy, Zhu Wen bowed in respect. The boy's face shifted with a different expression, and Zhu Wen quickly understood that something was off. He glanced between the boy and Xiao Mu. The boy realized that Zhu Wen understood what he was trying to communicate. However, Zhu Wen replied, "Don't try to flirt with me." He was already 40, have a wife, and was not interested in men, unless, of course, you want him to tell the others about his plan. In a swift move, Kuomyu stabbed the boy, causing him to cough up blood. He then taunted Zhu Wen, asking him to save the boy. The boy dropped to his knees, and Zhu Wen immediately recognized him as an assassin. Without hesitation, Zhu Wen rushed to attack Kuomyu. But just as he was about to engage, Chao Mu shoved the boy towards Zhu Wen. Suddenly, Chao Mu turned around to find Gua standing there. As Gua glared at Chao Mu understood that Gua was finally taking action. Gu lunged in him, and Kyo Mu knew he wouldn't be able to block. With a burst of energy, he broke through the wall and fell outside. Blood spilled from his mouth, and he called out to Gu, asking him to kill him if he could. Gu rushed to attack again, but Kyo Mu managed to escape, creating some distance between them. He realized that he had mastered the Golden Bell Cocoon technique, which was why Ghoul wouldn't be able to kill him so easily. Ghoul hit him, demanding to know why Kiamu had killed his son. Kiamu replied, "If evil was not punished, then the heavens were biased. If heaven wants to punish, you will be its instrument." With a swift movement, Chao Mu caused Gu to fall to the ground. As he moved to attack, Gu quickly jumped back to escape. Chao Mu attacked again, but Gu dodged once more. He then blocked another strike, warning Chao Mu that if he died, Gu would hang his corpse outside the city gate for 10 days. As a tribute to his son, Go punched Chao Mu, sending him crashing into the wall. People gathered to watch the scene unfold. Chao Mu, heavily injured and spitting blood, muttered, "Just let him die now." Gudu, filled with fury, raised his sword and slashed at Kailu, shattering his hands. Jia Wen remarked that the Lord hated brute force and those who recklessly challenged him, and now he intended to destroy every part of Gao Mu, using various methods to prevent him from dying. Go declared that next he would target Gao Mu's legs. As he attacked, Gao Mu stumbled back injured. He realized that Go wasn't planning to kill him just yet. He only wanted to torture him, and Gao Mu refused to satisfy Go's desire for suffering. In the midst of his pain, Kyo Mu murmured, "A swift breath of chivalry grants 1,000 miles of swift." Gallant light Go, seemingly in a good mood, sneered and prepared to attack again, mocking Kyo Mu for daring to compose a poem in such a dire situation. Chao Mu closed the gap between them, using the celestial demon dismantling technique. Who thought that Chao Mu had been holding back this skill? As Chao Mu rushed at him, Who stepped aside, realizing that Chao Mu was trying to escape. He swiftly struck Chao Mu's head with a well-placed blow, knocking him down, and Chao Mu fell unconscious, his body collapsing inside. Chuan watched in disbelief, wondering, wasn't Chao Mu the stubborn one? Enraged, Gua stabbed his sword into the ground and shouted in frustration. There were so many people here, and yet they let Chao Mu escape. He ordered his soldiers, "Let's head to the Chao family and don't spare anyone." The soldiers agreed and began to leave. Before they could go, Hu turned to Zhu Wen and commanded, "Go down and find Chao Mu, at least bring back his corpse." Zhu Wen agreed reluctantly, The scene then shifts to the river outside the city where Song He, the leader of a band of thieves, was traveling with his team. As they move along the riverbank, they noticed the lifeless body of Gao Mu floating in the water. Song He immediately ordered his men, "Get him out of the river quickly." 3 days had passed since the incident, and the heroic assassination of young Master Gua had spread throughout the city. Almost everyone was hoping and praying for Chao Yu's survival. Snow heard the news and thought to herself that as long as Chao Yu had the help of the sage last time, he would be fine. Chao Mi woke up still in his own body, realizing that he hadn't died. His head spun with dizziness and he felt intense pain from his injuries. Looking around, he saw a group of people standing nearby. Song He became emotional as he spoke, telling Chao Yu that he had heard about his heroic actions from the townspeople. He considered it his duty to save a hero like Chao Yu, and told him not to thank him. As Cao Mu tried to get up to speak Song, he stopped him, urging him to lie back down. He said he understood Cao Mu's condition. Cao Mu wondered what Song He meant by that, but the man insisted on helping him recover fully, showing his sincerity. Son He then asked if Xiao Mu was feeling alright. Xiao Mu replied, "Just give up on saving me, son." He, deep in thought, realized that Xiao Mu probably felt there was no way for him to recover, and didn't want to become a burden to others. Even in the face of death, Ku Omyu was thinking of others, which only made him more of a hero. In Song He's eyes, Song He grabbed Ku Omyu's injured hand, causing him pain, and told him that he knew it hurt but to not give up. He vowed that he would never let a hero die in front of him. As long as there was hope, Chimu could survive. After a moment he released Chimu's hand, and Chimu felt like his spirit was slipping away from his body. In that moment he wished for a way to escape the torture, and prayed to God for release. Song He, watching Chimu closely, wondered why his condition had worsened. He urged Chimu to stay strong. But after 2 more days, Chimu finally passed away in that body. Song He and the others cried bitterly for him. A short distance away from the village, Song He was summoned and checked his own status. He saw that his death ranking had increased to B+, and his other stats had risen as well. He thought to himself that although he had failed in saving Chao Mao, the increase in his ranking showed his fate was sealed. He considered it a not-so-bad bargain. Focusing on himself, Song He noticed the appearance of a cyclone in his dungeon. He realized that he had advanced from being a mid-class 8 warrior to a top-class 7. The series of revives had made him feel like he had spent decades honing his skills, including his understanding of a guide to legendary martial arts, mastery which had also improved. His growth had been incredibly efficient. Suddenly he heard rustling behind him in the bushes. It was the thieves Asong. He stood to approach and asked who they were. A thief spoke up, saying he looks like Gao Mu. The first thief, suspicious, demanded who he was and why he had been spying on our base. Chao Mu thought to himself that he would try something new this time. He introduced himself as Chao Sang, but he was Chao Mu, claiming to be the father of Chao Lin, and that he was there to find his son. Chao Mu. The 3 thieves hesitated. He didn't seem older than 30, yet he was referring to himself as the father of Chao Lin. Chao Miao realized this was the effect of the immortal punch. Snow had told him that, after mastering, one could remain young forever. He hadn't felt its effects before, but now he was starting to sense it. And now he had to get his hands on the second half of the book. He mentioned that he had just been practicing hard and training diligently, and asked the thieves to bring him to his son. A while later, at the thieves' base, Hyo Mu saw the lifeless body of his former self. Song He was sitting near it. Chao Mu, assuming the role of a grieving father, told Song He, "My son died as he wished. Please don't be so sorrowful over his death. The matters of the dead were over, but those of the living must continue." He then declared that Gu, the lord of Yen City, had killed both of the Cao family's sons. He would go after Mu himself. Song He, observing Kyo Mu, thought to himself, "No wonder everyone in the Cao family was so hot-headed. It must be him who instilled such things in his sons." Chao Mu told him that he could see through Song He, who was a thief and actually had plans for the entire world. Then he asked if Song He would join him in discussing the events involving Gua, and together they could fight for the people. Song He replied that it felt like a déjà vu moment. Chao Mu thought about how he was now at the peak of Class 7, strong enough to fight Gua. However, there were more than just Gu in his estate, and it would be wise to find an ally. Song He believed Kyomiu was indeed strong, and if they could rid themselves of Gu, it was worth a shot. But Song, he knew Kiyomiyu was hot-headed, so he decided to calm him down. First he told Chimu, now standing in his living body, that he had seen through him in an instant and was glad for that. However, defeating Gu would take time, and barging into his estate wouldn't work. Chimu told him to take his time and come find him when they were ready. While working with the corpse, Song he asked what he was doing. Chao Mu lifted the corpse and explained that he had mentioned earlier whether his son was alive or dead. He planned to find someone to send the body to Gu, so those dogs wouldn't interfere with Song. His grand scheme. Song, he was shocked, and asked if Chao Mua really intended to send his son's corpse to Gua. They both stepped outside and Song, he explained that Gua hated Chao Mua, and was planning to hang the corpse on the city wall, to show the people that Chao Mua would never rest in peace. Chao Mu replied that it would be perfect. He would use his son's corpse as bait, and if Gu left his estate for that purpose, they could easily kill him. Chao Mu stopped him from making such a move with his son. He turned to Song He and told him not to worry about that. If they could kill Gua, he would be the bait instead of his son. Song He thought for a moment, then bowed to show his respect. He said he would handle Ku Omyu's corpse with the best doctors in town. He advised Ku Omyu to stay in their base for a while, and wait for the news. Ku Omyu agreed, thinking that he had gained both an ally and a plan for the assassination. Now he needed to find a way to increase his death rating. The scene shifted to Gu's study, where he was reading a book. Suddenly a bird flew in carrying a letter tied to its leg. Go took the letter and thought to himself that even the best steers from the martial arts club couldn't find any information about the Chao family. Could it be that Chao Mu and his family were pretending to be a larger group? He realized he had almost been fooled by two foolish children. A man entered and reported that they had found the corpse of Chao Mu. A doctor in Panshin town had discovered the body in the river and had immediately notified them. Go asked where the corpse was, eager to see it for himself. Upon seeing the body, he confirmed that it was indeed Kyomui. The man added that he had heard Kyomui died painfully. In the doctor's house, Gu ordered him to investigate the doctor, and told him that he would personally hang Cal Mu's body on the town wall. The following day, the next day, the main gate of the town was closed, and no outsiders were allowed to enter. From a distance, Cal Mu looked at it and remarked that Gu was so vigilant, locking down the entire city just to hang a corpse. Was he so worried that another member of the Chao family might appear? From the crowd, it seemed like he had already made plans. Chao Mao thought back to his conversation with Song He the previous night when they had gone over the map of Yen City. Chao Mu told Song He that while they might be collaborating, they still needed to proceed separately. Song He asked if Chao Mu had already made a plan. Chao Mu replied that he needed them to infiltrate the city. The moment Gu left his residence, Song He would have to create a diversion and delay the reinforcements, while Chao Mu would go straight to Gu and slay him alone. Song He slammed his hand on the table, asking if Xiao Mu was really planning to face Gu alone. Xiao Mu, surprised, stood firm and told him not to try to persuade him. He believed that no one could surpass him when it came to fighting. Song He, excited, acknowledged that assassinating Gua was the most dangerous step in the plan, and yet Kelmo was willing to shoulder such a heavy burden, opening the path forward for the rest of them. Xiao Mu stopped him, saying that he simply didn't want Song He to be involved. It would be better this way if you were being honest. Xiao Mu loved to show off in front of others, and he wouldn't let Song He rob him of that opportunity. Also, if Song He could find any additional clues while infiltrating whose residence, it would be a great help. Song He was shocked to see Kyomu risking his life over this, and he realized he was more hot-headed than Kyomu himself. Chao moved and continued, mentioning that when Song He had first met him by the river, he must have fallen into the well inside Lord Gu's residence. He believed there was a path beneath the well that would lead outside the city and into the mountains the next day. Song He would use that route to enter the residence unnoticed and help Chao Mi with his mission. The scene shifted to the present time, where Song He and his team reached the secret path. He ordered them, let's infiltrate the residence of Lord Gua and assist Xiao Mio in his task of assassinating the thief Gua. Let's move out. Meanwhile, Kiyomu stood near a cliff and thought to himself, looking at the time, Song He should have found the secret path by now. It's time for him to move forward. He stood at a great height, and if he fell from there, he would certainly be dead. But then, without hesitation, He jumped shouting for the system to transport him to the designated response point. The scene shifted to the outer city district where Kilmu was summoned. He was pleased to have arrived directly in the city, and as he searched for his spear, he vowed that he will definitely take down Gua. Hours later, Gua arrived with many guards carrying the dead body to hang. The people were shocked, as they had to believe it was the funeral of the young master. But none of them were dressed in funeral garments. One person remarked that the city had been in chaos for several days, and wondered when it would finally end. Ghoul ordered open the casket and show the corpse. A man kicked it open and grabbing the hair of the corpse, lifted it to display. The crowd gasped in horror at the gruesome body. But it didn't look like the young master. Instead it resembled the hero who had attacked the young master. Someone recalled hearing the story the day before, about how a person named Kyomiyu had broken into Lord Gu's residence. A man whispered that this wasn't a funeral procession, but an operation, a heinous act that Gu was carrying out, which posed a threat to everyone there. He feared that even if there were capable and chivalrous people, in the future they might not dare to rise against Gua. Another man argued, how can they call Xiao Mu a hero when he broke into the Lord's residence in broad daylight and committed murder? Such actions must be dealt with according to the law of the Crimson Emperor, and his execution was well deserved. A boy standing at the back spoke up asking, but the young master did the same thing. Why isn't anyone saying that? What the young master did was also against the law. Another boy spoke up, saying that people were dying of starvation all over the city of Yen. Yet the Lord had done nothing to help. If we're talking about the law, he said Gu should be the first one to be executed. The man who heard this grew angry, and referred to the boys as disgraceful beggars. How dare they talk about the law and insult the Lord? He ordered the people to beat the boys. As they were being beaten, the boys shouted that chasing away hungry civilians and locking down the city for petty revenge had caused food prices to soar. Karma will surely catch up with the corrupt officials and merchants, they cried. The man sneered, claiming that if they were starving to death, it was their own fault. Why didn't they work harder to make money? He taunted, it doesn't matter how much you starve. The smell of poverty from places like the Spring Fragrance Towers will only stick up the city. It's better for peasants like he to die early and be reborn as dogs, like that Chao Mu. Suddenly Chao Mu, now in his own body, appeared, slashing his hair and rushing forward with his spear. The people who had been beating the boys now turned on the man, calling him an evil merchant. The man, now in fear, called out to Gu for help. One of the guards reported to Gu, it seems someone was causing a ruckus over there. Gu dismissed it, saying, ignore them, they're just a bunch of peasants. We'll capture a few of them tomorrow and kill them to set an example. The spear was thrown toward him, and before he could react, it struck, knocking him off his horse. The guards quickly surrounded him, shouting that there had been an assassination attempt, and they needed to protect their lord. Gu realized just how narrowly he had escaped. If he had been any slower, the spear would have pierced his head. Chao Yu approached, exuding overwhelming power, and confronted Gua. He murdered my family and showed off their corpses to the public. He said, such deep-seated hatred. The Chao family must make him pay. 1,000 times over. Go was shocked to see him, and wondered how it was possible for Ku Omyu to be alive. Can't be, he muttered. Ku Omyu smirked until he was the father of him, whose eyes widened in disbelief. There's more of the Cow family, he said, stunned. How many of them were there? And what did they mean? The Cow family didn't exist. The martial arts faction lied to me. He then ordered his men to go and kill Chao Mu. Without hesitation, Chao Mu called out, challenging them, come at me and don't hold back. He struck the sword with his hand, forcing the man to fall back. Another attacker approached from behind, but with incredible speed. He stepped aside and used his sword to defeat him. Several archers released arrows toward him, but he spun his spear around to defend himself. The guards raised their shields to stop him, but his strength was overwhelming, and he shattered their defense with a single blow. The onlookers wondered who this monster was, as he had broken their formation on his own. One of them reassured the others not to worry, as they hadn't yet sent their strongest fighters. Juwen ordered them not to retreat and to continue the fight. He was taking Gu away from there, and Gu thought to himself that if no one from the Chao family feared death, why wouldn't these mad dogs let go? Not to mention Chao Mu looked so much like his son. If one were to say they were father and son, Their actions and expressions were identical. They were the spitting image of each other. Xiao Mu told Gu that he would not escape. Zhou Wen left Gu behind, instructing him to stay there while he went to deal with Xiao Mu. He attacked with his sword, but Xiao Mu blocked it with his spear, stating that he was there to avenge his son, and asking why Zhou Wen stood in his way. Zhou Wen demanded that Xiao Mu be silent, claiming that Xiao Mu's son had killed Gu's son, and thus he deserved to die. Shigo Mu said that the son of Gu spent his days bullying the people of the city, and that he had done a great service to the people by taking him down. Juewin, enraged, shouted that no one was allowed to slander his young master. Shimu mocked Juewin, calling him the loyal dog of the Gu family, wondering what they had fed him to make him think he was better than everyone else. Su Wen shouted at him to shut up before slashing his sword again. Chao Mo dodged the attack and then stabbed his spear at Su Wen's chest, telling him that he had exposed himself now, that he had worked up a rage. Ju Wen grabbed the spear, vowing that he wouldn't let Chao Mu take another step forward, even if he had to sacrifice his life. Chao Mu taunted him, calling him a good dog, but lamenting that his master was useless. A nearby guard was shocked to see that Ju won a Class 7 mark. The martial artist had already been overwhelmed in less than 10 rounds. The second guard wondered if Su Wen was trying to escape, but noticed the Lord hadn't even joined the fight yet. Just then Gua, furious, told Su Wen that he had done enough. He then stabbed Su Wen's sword across, hitting Xiao Mu as well. Kyomiu realized he had been outsmarted, and swore that he would kill Gu next time. Both of them fell to the ground, and Gu laughed menacingly, declaring that it was the fate of those who stood against the lord of the city. He wondered aloud, what would happen if the Kaio family brought an army to fight him? He would kill every last one of them, and no one could stop him. Chao Mu was revived once again, sitting somewhere as he pondered his death reading. He was surprised to find that it had changed, and as he delved deeper into the details, he discovered something troubling. By being revived, his lifespan was decreasing. He was losing years of his life, as the new user protection period had passed. Had he known, he would have invested everything into mastering the Immortal Punch. Snob explained that once one mastered the Immortal Punch, they could lock their vitality at its peak, effectively extending their lifespan. If Xiao Meiwen had focused all of his efforts on that, he would be set for life and halfway to becoming an immortal. He was grateful for the generous rewards from his ratings, or else he'd be in real trouble. However, there was no time to dwell on that song. He was still waiting for him. As for the issue of lifespan deduction, Shimu decided to study it more carefully after dealing with Gu. Just then a man arrived with bad news. Something had happened at Gu's mansion. A group of people had appeared out of nowhere, infiltrated the mansion, taken advantage of the lack of defense, killed all the guards, and seized control of the mansion. Go was shocked to hear such news. Gu ordered everyone to be called back and returned to the estate. However, he and his team stood in their way. Armed and determined, they declared that they wouldn't let Gu escape, because they had to uphold their honor as heroes. Gu, in rage, dismissed them as a worthless bunch of ants. He then commanded his guards to kill them all, leaving no one alive. The archers fired their arrows towards his team, but before the arrows could even reach them, they were all sliced down midair. It was revealed that Xiao Mu had come to destroy them. Go was shocked, exclaiming that it was impossible, as he had killed Chao Mao with his own hands. Chao Mao ignored his words and rushed forward to attack, calling on the others to charge with him. Together they were going to take back Yen's city. One guard turned to another and said, it seemed like the situation wasn't in their favor. He asked what they should do. As he glanced back at the second guard, he realized that the second one had already fled. The remaining guards wondered if Chilmed was human or a ghost, and how they were supposed to fight him. They questioned why they should risk their lives for the little pay they received each month. Slowly they began to retreat, murmuring that the people of Yen City were already full of life again, and now the city lord wanted to kill them, making him nothing more than a beast. Someone spoke up, saying that they had joined the army to protect the peace of the land. If they were to recall slaughtering innocent people on the same day, they would never be able to face their parents again. Another guard agreed, adding that if Gu could abandon Suwon, who had worked for him for years, then he would have no hesitation in discarding them all. Gu, furious, demanded that no one run away. Anyone who disobeyed his orders would be executed. He made it clear that no one could leave, Chao Mu moved in closer, preparing to attack with his spear, but Gu stopped it with his sword. The outcome of this day was entirely the result of Gu's own actions, and now they all had to be ready to die. Gu struck him with his sword, asking if Kumu truly believed he could take over Gu's position. The attack grazed Kumu's face, leaving a small scratch. He felt a fierce sword energy emanating from Gu's strike, and though Gu too had been injured, his strength remained formidable. Gu yelled that it was all Chao Mu's fault for destroying everything Gu had worked so hard to build over the years. He slashed at Chao Mu again, vowing to kill him, and that every last member of the Chao family must die. Gu continued slashing at Chao Mu, landing several blows that forced him to his knees. As Gu prepared to land another strike, he declared that it was all over now. With the pure Yang sword a weapon of judgment, Gu attacked, aiming to kill Chao Mu, but with rage burning in his chest. Chao Mu stood up, stopping the attack with his hand. Gu was shocked, exclaiming that Che Mun had caught his sword with his bare hands. Had he already seen through Gu's sword style? It seemed impossible. They hadn't even exchanged 10 moves. There was no way Che Mun could have figured it out. Che Mun replied that if it was their first encounter, he would never have been able to read Gu's style. But this was their third encounter. As Gu processed this, Kademu thrust his spear into him, pulling it out immediately and setting it aside. Gu fell to his knees, realizing he had been played for a fool. The boy standing before him was in reality Kademu. No one else as good guy. Kyomu declared that it was the Kyo family who had killed him. The onlookers cheered, hailing Kyomu as a hero. But then suddenly, blood began to spill from his head and he collapsed to the ground. He thought it was perfect. He had put on a show and died afterward. It seemed like he might earn a rating again. Just then Song. He arrived, asking if Kyomi was fine. He quickly lifted Chao Mao, insisting that they needed to get him out of there. Song, he said, don't worry and he will surely save him. Chao Mao, barely conscious, thought to himself that Song. He should let him go, he didn't need saving. In truth Song. He was a cruel-hearted person, and Chao Mu didn't want to owe him anything. Song, he reassured Chao Mu by mentioning that he was alive and showing off the muscles that indicated a great recovery. However, Chao Mu's sour expression suggested it was due to his mood. The channels in Chao Mu's body had been nearly destroyed, and only a fraction less than a tenth. If his internal energy remained, it might take a long time before he could fully recover, and the city of Yen was far behind. When it came to medical care and martial arts expertise, Song, he spent several days searching for a cure, but he assured Kyomu not to fret. He would do everything in his power to help him recover. Chiolemo thought to himself that if Song, he stopped trying to save him, he would immediately get better, but he couldn't afford treatment. At least he could leave and hide for now. He mentioned that he needed some fresh air. Song, he asked if he was referring to his body. Xiaomu wondered what he meant. Realizing that he had forgotten his body was still out on the streets. Song, he explained that the fake body of Xiao Mu had been placed there, and it was a clever ruse. He had even asked someone else to impersonate him, so that Guo would lower his guard. Xiao Mu nodded, asking where the fake body was. Song replied, assuring Xiao Mu not to worry. He had buried the great warrior and his sacrifice was not in vain. Chrysanthemums had been planted around the tombstone, and the grave would receive paper money every Qingming festival. Kia Omu commented on the kindness of this gesture, before asking if there were any martial arts factions nearby. Song, he replied that, as far as he knew, there were none in the immediate area. But such factions were still active around Hung Prefecture. Chao Mu asked if Haiyang was to the north. Song, he confirmed this. Chao Mu thought for a moment, feeling as though something had been calling him from the north. Ever since he began studying the guide to legendary martial art mastery, it must be Haiyang. Perhaps even the Chao family was there. He stood up, declaring that he would head to Heian Prefecture and asking Song he to take care of Yen City in his absence. Song, he urged him to wait, explaining that Chao Mu's wounds hadn't fully healed yet. He was still in no condition to travel, and he should rest a little longer. Chao Mu replied that he couldn't do much by staying, and perhaps going to Haiyang was the only way he might find a cure. He also suspected that he might be trying to escape from Song He, and the bad luck that seemed to follow him. Song He asked him to wait just a moment, then offered to write a letter of recommendation. He had an old acquaintance, Shen King, who was currently a government official in Haiyang. It would be easy for him to find a position for Xiao Mu there. Xiao Mu remarked that he had thought Song He was a bandit. How did he end up with a friend who was an official? Was he someone who worked with both the law and those who defied it? Song He replied that the official was an old co-worker, and it was nothing worth mentioning. Kielmu chuckled and said that someone like him, a doctor who couldn't become a government official, would make a fine bandit. He then suggested that he should give his friend the name Kielmu, as he didn't want to draw too much attention, due to his notorious reputation. Song He agreed, handing him the letter and wishing him a swift journey. Chao Emo smiled and said that he was a good lad. Song He and he will owe him one. He then suggested they split the loot. As Song He thought about the loot, he couldn't believe how much the thieving Gu had stolen from the people. He was truly beneath even a beast. Chao Mu, excited by the newfound wealth, lay down in the pile of gold coins. But then he suddenly paused. He looked at Song He and asked him to take all of it. Song He was shocked by his request. Chao Mu explained, there were still many people on the verge of starving to death. They can't leave them to their fate. Use the money to buy food for them and they'll appreciate. He stood up, continuing with the city lord down. The government will likely send someone soon. Rather than let another Gu take charge, he should take control of the city instead. Use it as their base and make his plans from there. Song He became emotional and hugged Chao Mao, saying that he really were a man of principles. Chao Mao, someone who cares little for worldly possessions. My respect for him was immeasurable, like a river that flows endlessly. Chao Mao, uncomfortable, asked him to stop. It's not like he was leaving empty-handed, he said, then revealed in martial arts book, adding he will take this. Chao Mu appreciated the gesture, recognizing that the Per-Yang, limitless art was one of the most powerful techniques among the ancient martial arts. He asked if that's for real and let him take a look, but as he skimmed through it, he was surprised to find it spoke about matters like virginity and such. Song He, noticing his confusion, asked, wasn't he already married with children? And he didn't think he would be able to use this book anymore. Chao Mu was taken aback, wondering what Song He meant by that. Why wouldn't he be able to use it? He was still the body of a 15-year-old kid. He paused, then added that he can't afford to lose even a bit of my internal yang. If you want to practice that art, how would a vigorous young man like him endure? Song He, unfazed, handed him another scroll and said, and try the mortal body transformation technique instead. Song He explained that the technique was a modern creation by a legendary martial artist, and the book contained many levels, each increasing in difficulty. The early sections featured miraculous techniques, including methods for body sculpting, facial transformation, and bone shrinking. If someone were to achieve great success with this technique, they would be able to control their body and move with such precision that they could transform into anyone they desire. It was essentially a form of 72 transformations, and the success rate was particularly high that day. The content of the book was dense and time-consuming to learn, so Song He suggested that they looked at it together. After Kyomu had recovered, he added that it wouldn't be too late to head to Hang Prefecture. Afterward, Chao Mu realized Song He was likely trying to convince him to stay longer, but he knew he couldn't afford to remain there any longer. If he stayed, he might never escape. So be swift, and made his exit, telling Song He that he had been a great help, and he will be sure to repay him tenfold in the future. Song He thought for a moment and said they will meet again one day. When that time comes, he will ask Hyo Mu to be a part of my plan. Chao Mu arrived at the home of Snow and opened the door, calling out for her when he didn't find her. He wondered if she had already left, but then she appeared behind him, closing his eyes and saying it hasn't been 7 days. Where would he go? He turned to face her and replied, today was the 7th day and he have already dealt with Gua. He noticed she was wearing a different outfit, and remarked that she had changed clothes. And what's this bag him was carrying? They both remained silent for a while, and then he spoke, saying he was going to Haiyang Prefecture to search for the legendary martial artist and the other half of the Immortal Punch manual. He mentioned that they might be separated for a while again. However, she pointed out that it was a coincidence, as she was heading there as well. He wondered if she was sure it wasn't just because she missed him. She replied firmly that it wasn't the case at all, explaining that Hainan Prefecture was home to many immortal families, and was the perfect place for anyone wishing to be introduced to the way of the immortals. Chao Yu asked if this was true. She told him to either believe her or not, and with that she was leaving. He followed her, jokingly telling her not to get angry as he was only teasing. The scene shifted to Hainan Prefecture, specifically to the estate of Shin King, where Chimu introduced himself, explaining that he had come to visit Magistrate Shin. On the recommendation of Song He, Shin asked if he was really recommended by Song He had heard that Chimu had been heavily injured, but from the looks of it he seemed fine. Now Chao Mu responded that it was a complicated matter, and speculated that he had simply died, again during the process of preparation, while also reaching the beginner level in the Per-Yang, Limitless Arts and the Mortal Body Transformation. Shan then asked where the person who recommended him was. Chao Mu replied that Song He lived in the mountains and was difficult to find. He at once met him by chance. Chen wondered how Song He could recommend Xiao Miao after such a brief encounter. Nevertheless, Chen decided not to pry if Song He wished to keep things private. He then remarked that it was a shame, as the handwriting of Song He brought back memories without the medicine Song He had prescribed, written in that exact style. Chen would have been dead long ago. If Song He had recommended Chao Mu, then Chao Mu must be reliable. Shin added that, while they were only hiring clerks and constables at the moment, Chao Mu could choose whichever role suited him. Chao Mu considered this, and thought that a constable whose main job was to investigate would have more freedom. It would also give him an opportunity to move around the city and learn more about the martial arts factions. He then told Shin that he would choose the constable position. Chao Mu had become a constable. As he introduced himself to the other constables, one of them whispered to another, wondering how Chao Mu had already become a constable. Considering Shin had never shown favoritism before, they were curious about who he really was. Just then the chief constable, Chun Ingshu, arrived and told them to be silent. She reminded them that they had a new colleague to introduce, and they should be respectful. She then announced that they would discuss the case. Now that everyone was present, the other constables seemed uneasy and Xiao Mu felt confused. Ingshu continued saying that they might have already heard about the monster Wu Chang in the capital of Hainan Prefecture. The constables looked frightened, and Chelmu was even more perplexed. Ingshu explained that a monster had been rampaging through the city, recently taking many lives. The monster's name was Wu Chang, a special kind of creature that could feed on the energy of the dead. Every time it appeared it claimed a life. Just as it had with Wu Chan, the creature was incredibly powerful, and many martial artists had attempted to capture, most of them at the 5th or 6th class. But none had survived. Chao Mu's excitement grew. This monster was clearly worth dying for. Ingshu continues saying that they would need to cooperate with the Shen-Tian faction. For the case, Xiaomi recalled Snow's words. Not long after the Cao family was wiped out, a Taoist temple named Shen-Tian was built on the land where the Cao family once stood. This temple was now known as the Shen-Tian faction. He thought to himself that this could not be a coincidence. The Shen-Tian faction must have some connection to the martial arts world, especially since they had so easily taken over the Cao family's land. It seemed likely that he could learn more about the whereabouts of the second half of the immortality punch from this faction if he was fortunate. He might even discover other ways to cultivate. Meanwhile, other constables were complaining, lamenting why they had been tasked with such a dangerous job. They described it as a thankless task with no chance of a bonus. Chao Mu, confused, asked why everyone was reacting this way. One of the constables explained that they were just ordinary constables and had no idea how to handle supernatural matters. The boss, Chun Ing-Su, was the strongest among them, and even she had barely reached class 7. Chao Yu asked if the job had just been forced upon them, with no regard for their well-being. The constable sighed and responded, "What else can they do? The imperial court listens to the immortals on everything, and we're the ones who get stuck with the dirty work." A lady suddenly appeared, flying on something, and told them not to worry. She had arrived at the perfect time, since they were discussing the case of the monster Wu Chang. The constable soon realized she was the Lunar Free from the Kachuan Tian faction. She landed gracefully, then disappeared from the object she had been flying on. She reassured them that they wouldn't have to fight the monster themselves, but merely needed to track it down and report back to her immediately. Once they found it, their services would be greatly appreciated. The constables were excited and thanked her, calling her the kind-hearted fairy. They assured her that they would find the monster's trail. One of them added that At least they were realistic about their capabilities. They were only good at running errands anyway. Shu muttered that these people were really eager to work themselves to the bone. Chao Mu, however, thought that such a task would be nothing for an immortal. Why didn't she just handle it herself? Was she trying to mess with the imperial court in some way? The fairy explained that the monster fed on the energy of the dead and tended to appear near people who were about to die, such as those in hospitals or prisons. If they couldn't find its trail near these places, she suggested they could use a group of dying people as bait. To lure the monster out, one constable hesitantly spoke up, saying he wasn't sure about using people as bait. Another asked if that wasn't a bit too much. The fairy mentioned that the people were dying anyway, so why not make the best use of them before their time was up? Shu then asked what she planned to do with the monster once they captured. The fairy replied that heaven was benevolent, and she would take the monster back to their faction for punishment. As a guilty being, it would serve them for the rest of its days, to atone for the crimes it had committed. Shu grew angry upon hearing this, and asked how the monster could be allowed to live among the immortals after it had murdered countless people in Dian. Where was the justice in that? She reminded the fairy that Dian's law stated that those who committed murder must pay with their lives. The fairy calmly responded that Dian's laws only applied to ordinary people, not to immortals. Monsters and demons were under their jurisdiction, not the imperial court's. Kira Mo, trying to diffuse the tension, asked what they were supposed to do if they accidentally killed the monster while tracking it. The fairy said it was dangerous, and the moment they encountered the monster, they simply needed to report back to her. Kalmu leaned in, asking, what if they were hunted down by the monster and had no time to report it? What if they weren't allowed to fight back? And if by some miracle they managed to kill it, would they receive some reward from the immortals, like a trip to their headquarters? The fairy responded coldly, saying that the land of the immortals was not for mortals to trample on. Chao Mu thought to himself that they were a bunch of arrogant bastards. It seemed he would have to find other ways to investigate the Shen Tian faction. The fairy was about to leave, making her flying object appear beneath her. She told them that she would like to hear news about the monster within 3 days and would be waiting. With that, she flew off. One of the constables turned to Sweet and asked what they should do. Were they really going to find some dying people to use as bait? And Shui replied firmly that the government of the D and dynasty did not take orders from the immortals. She instructed them to continue the search within the city, leaving no stone unturned. If they found anything, they were to report it to her immediately, and she would handle the rest. As the constables went off to carry out their orders, and Shui asked Kyomu to stay behind. She remarked that Shin had already broken protocol, and by recruiting Chao Mao, it meant he must have some real skills. She asked if he had merely been taunting the fairy, or if he actually had a plan to kill the monster. Chao Mao replied that he was just asking objective questions, not taunting anyone. Shui asked if he was serious, and he confirmed that he was. She then ordered him to join the search for clues. Agreeing, Chao Mu left the area, his thoughts turning to the possibility of being killed by the monster, which fed on the energy of death. The scene shifted to the west of the city. At the Drunken Immortal restaurant, a man stood at the balcony looking out over the city. When someone knocked and entered, it was Chu Xing who spoke, saying they had news about Song He, a spy they had planted next to Shin. Reported that someone named Xiao Mu had entered the prefecture government and become a constable. The recommendation letter from Song. He didn't mention anything about Chao Mi's background, so it was possible that Shin knew nothing about him. It was rumored that Song He had turned to the way of the immortals. The man scoffed, dismissing the idea as nonsense. He knew Song He hated immortals with every fiber of his being, so why would he ever try to learn their ways? Chuk Sing replied that humans were bound to change. Song He had laid low for his children, and now suddenly he had recommended someone. This person, Cao Mu, had to be of great importance as well. The man ordered an agreement to be made, wanting to see just who Cao Mu really was. The scene shifts to the Taoist temple on King Luan Peak, where Snow meets Ling Ling. Ling Ling mentions that Snow was still an infant the last time they met, and that a decade had passed in the blink of an eye. Snow had come here after all, and so it seemed fate had brought her to this moment. As Snow is about to speak, Ling Ling interrupts, saying she knows what happened to the Chao family. She speaks of the way of the immortals and the martial arts, noting that there was nothing inherently wrong with either path. People were not born with exceptional spiritual sense, but if there were better methods of cultivation, why hadn't Snow chosen them? Since Snow refused to join any immortal faction, it would make no difference if she stayed with Lin. Snow agrees, her thoughts drifting to Skaemu. Meanwhile, in a prison, a man tells Kumu to behave while he was there, reminding him that not even 10 lifetimes would be enough for him to atone for his actions. Saf responds, saying not to worry, he has no plans of leaving. He isn't dying to escape this opportunity. The scene shifts again, this time to a few moments earlier, inside the Dawn's Jade Pavilion tea house, where a storyteller recounts Chimu's actions. He recalls how Chimu had declared himself a warrior, with no path left but forward. After making that declaration, he killed the Lord with a single strike of his lance, and left without a second glance. The people were buzzing with excitement, hailing him as a true hero. Xiao Mu, sitting in a different table, listened to their praise and wondered what was so entertaining about constantly talking about him. There was a monster in the city, and the storyteller should be talking about something more relevant. He thought about learning more about the city, to figure out where the monster might strike next. Then perhaps he could die happy. Instead, he spent half an hour listening to tales of his own glorious past, which felt like a complete waste of time. A man approached him, mentioning that, as the constable of the capital of He and Prefecture, Chiu Mu should be working, not listening to stories in broad daylight. It seemed like he was neglecting his duties. Chao Mu responded rudely, asking if the man was trying to teach him how to do his job. The man quickly denied it, saying he was only joking. Chao Mei realized that this man wasn't just a random person. He could tell from his confident demeanor that he was someone important. The person behind him had moved an inch, yet an oppressive aura radiated from him. Chao Mu could tell he was a martial arts expert as well. Chao Mu asked, how do you know he was not already on a case? If he was so interested in other people's business, why not go tell the emperor what to do as well? Thing was angered by Kumu's response, but the man stopped him with a comment, acknowledging that Kumu certainly had a way with words. He then expressed curiosity about Kumu's opinion of the current emperor, asking what kind of person he thought he was. Chao Mu, thinking to himself, mused that the emperor would be better off dead. He still had the chance to carry out his plan, to assassinate the emperor of Dian. It was said that the emperor would soon pass through Yan City, but Chao Mu hadn't seen any sign of him. He had killed Gua, and he hadn't even seen a wanted poster for himself. He had hoped the court would execute him. Those people might very well be some local officials, but if Xiao Mu cursed the emperor in front of them, and was executed as a result, his death could shake the world. His name would be remembered forever. He mused that would make him a ruler for the ages. Others around them looked at him puzzled. The man asked if Xiao Mu wasn't perhaps overrating the emperor. Xiao Mu smiled, faintly denying it, and suggested they take a closer look at the emperor's reigning title, Yan He, which meant eternal peace. The emperor hadn't even put up a fight against the immortals, and was now doing nothing more than licking their boots. If this wasn't the eternal peace, he claimed, then there would never be any fighting again. Sing was fuming, wondering how Chiu Mu dared call the emperor a coward. The man then spoke, noting that the immortals were an incredibly powerful force. Not even legendary martial artists had a chance against them. An army of 100,000 had been completely wiped out. Perhaps the emperor was simply looking at the bigger picture, and making compromises to ensure stability. Chao Mu raised an eyebrow, and asked if he meant to say that the emperor was just planning some big moves. Later on, the man was visibly upset, but he held his ground, saying that compromises were unavoidable if there were no other options. However, he made a clear distinction between retreating to regain strength, and simply giving in to every demand. Half of Yen City was uninhabitable, and the people had no choice but to steel themselves to survive. The Lord did nothing, and the imperial court was no better. Xiaomu casually placed his leg on the table and spoke. The emperor claims to rule by the mandate of heaven, but the implication was that the people were no different from livestock, sacrificed whenever the immortals see fit. The civilians were suffering, and the imperial court has nothing to offer. Who knows how many other cities were in the same state? This was the so-called Son of Heaven who claims to be above all men. Singh slammed his fist on the table, shouting that such talk was completely preposterous. Chowmi raised his voice asking why were he getting worked up. Everyone knows the emperor does whatever the immortals tell him, even set up residences for them in every major city. Favoritism couldn't be more obvious. One person nearby wondered aloud where someone had found the courage to publicly insult the Lord, while another remarked that it was more thrilling than the usual tea-time stories. The man wondered if Chowmi was making things far too obvious. Did he realize who he was speaking to and was doing this on purpose? Perhaps this was exactly how the former Minister of Justice he had felt. He had been willing to sacrifice his life just to prove to the late emperor that they absolutely could not submit to the immortals. And now the world had turned out just as he had predicted. Sting drew his sword and placed it in front of Kagame. According to the law of Dayan, those who ridicule the emperor in public shall be arrested and beheaded in the fall. He declared. The man noted that regardless of everything else, Chowmu had a remarkable ability to provoke people. Even Xing, who was usually composed, had lost his temper. Chowmu met Xing's gaze without flinching. He replied that he stand by waited, and he alone will take any punishment. No one else will interfere. The man found himself wondering why Kyomu seemed so eager to get himself killed. Then after a moment he sighed and shook his head and he understand nothing about this country. He was just making a spectacle of himself for attention. With that he turned to leave. Xiao Mei was stunned. He had fully expected to lose his head over this. Yet the man was simply walking away doing nothing. How was that even possible? As they were leaving, Kyomu thought about stopping them, wondering if he could curse even harder. Just then a guard approached, calling out to him excited. Kabeo Mu raised his hand, only for the man to tell him that someone had reported his public insult of the emperor, and that he needed to come with them now. Chow Mao wondered if the guard was capturing him, and decided he wouldn't resist. The scene shifted to the present, where Chow Mao, sitting in a cell, asked the guards when they were going to execute him. Was he really going to wait until fall? He asked. Fall was too far away. He can't waste tax money like that. Just do it now, he told me. To wait for a perfect moment and make it a spectacle. He was not afraid of the crowds. The guards were shocked by his reaction. One of them muttered, who else courts death like this? Does he know someone has his back and that he can't die? The second guard asked, what kind of person does he have backing him to get away with insulting the emperor like that? With a sigh, one of the guards hit the cell bars with a rod and warned Chao Mu to behave himself and not try to escape. Chao Mu settled back, thinking that this was the right jail to be in. After all, it was a death row cell, and he could feel the monster-like energy in the air. Then he noticed another prisoner in a different cell, who had been coughing for a while. Xiao Mu felt the same cat-like aura coming from that direction. There was a cute cat near the man, and he wondered how it had gotten there. He lifted the trembling cat, preparing to remove it, saying that the death row inmates and the place itself were no different from the netherworld. The rats here weren't clean, so eating them wouldn't be good for the cat's health. He decided to get the cat out of there. Suddenly the man collapsed and Cao Mu called out to him, asking if he was all right. The man gave a thumbs up and assured him he was fine. He then explained that in his past life, he was known as the Thief Saint, famous for robbing the rich and helping the poor, and he was well reputed throughout the Jianghu. Cao Mu commented that the man's injuries seemed serious. The man dismissed his concern, calling it nonsense. He wondered how the Thief Saint could be taken down by such a small fall. When he was younger, he could last hundreds of rounds against masters of unusual martial arts, employed by powerful families. If not for a single mistake that led to his capture, he would still be a legendary hero in the Django. Chao Mu thought to himself that the man should stop rambling, though he was sure the man was speaking from the perspective of someone nearing the end of their life. The old man continued recounting a time he had robbed a rich merchant, one who lived in the brick house where the man had grown up. Before he could finish the story, he collapsed again. Chao Mu called out, asking if anyone could help. The cat exploded into a dark green aura, and Chao Mu broke through the gate of his cell, wondering what the cat was doing. When he reached the scene, he found the old man dead. Constable Chun explained that the energy of the dead could increase a monster's power if his hunch was correct. The cat was no ordinary creature but a wuxia monster. The cat then transformed into a giant, terrifying form, and Chao Mu boldly told it to come and kill him. As the monster charged, Chao Mu confirmed that it was indeed a fight to the death. However, the cat suddenly returned to its normal cute form. Chao Mu was shocked and demanded it stay away from him. He questioned why the supposed ruthless, murderous monster was acting so cute and wondered if it had no shame. He tried to push it away, but it clung to him, acting affectionately in a way he had never seen before. Chao Mu realized that the monster fed on the energy of the dead, and wondered if this strange behavior was because he himself was nearing death just then. A man approached and asked the guard where Chao Mu was. The guard explained that Kyo Mu was the criminal who had insulted the emperor in public, and no prisoner ever escaped from the fortress. Chao Mu, uninterested, asked when he was going to be executed and suggested they hurry up. As he couldn't wait, the man chuckled, saying that Kyo Mu was being humorous. He clarified that it had all been a misunderstanding, and that he had come to release Kilmu from the prison. Kilmu was shocked and asked if they were kidding him. He had worked so hard to get into that prison, and now they were just letting him out. The man didn't understand, and explained that they were at fault for mishandling the case. Even if Kilmu had broken out of jail, he wouldn't have been reprimanded. He then instructed the guard to unlock Chiu Mu's cuffs. As the guard released him, the man thought to himself that Chiu Mu could have escaped at any time, but chose not to even after insulting the emperor as he did. Someone would eventually come with a royal decree to have him released. With the kind of connections Kal Mu had, they couldn't afford to offend him. Kyomu then mentioned there was one more thing. He asked to bury the old man as he had died from a fall. The man praised Kyomu for being so kind-hearted, and assured him that the old man would receive a proper burial. Kyomu thought it was all settled, but then wondered where the cat had gone. Meanwhile, Shin scolded him, saying it had only been 2 days since Chao Mo started working, and he had already gotten himself arrested, while holding an official position. If he didn't get himself together, it would reflect poorly on the prefecture's magistrate. Chao Mu replied calmly that Shin already knew what kind of person he was. He had deliberately gotten himself arrested as part of an ambush. In the prison, he asked Shin to just believe that he wasn't acting out of self-interest. Shin shouted, asking if they were all so stupid. Did Chao you really need to insult the emperor in public just to get into prison? As Shin scolded him, Ing intervened, explaining that Shin had to use his privileges to get Chao Yu out. He had even personally visited Magistrate Lu, bringing gifts to help with the matter. Shin wondered who would even care about Chao Mu if it weren't for Song. Chao Mu sincerely thanked him, thinking that both Shin and Song he were always getting in his way, preventing him from meeting his end. Shin told him not to mention it again, advising him to be more careful with his actions and words. In the future, although Shin would try his best to help Pleomu, Lu had already informed him that someone had arrived with the order from the Flying Fish. To release him, the Flying Fish were the Emperor's elite guards, and their orders came directly from the Emperor. Shun couldn't help but wonder, was the Emperor somehow connected to Skal Mu? Had the Emperor ordered him to insult him in public? What if the Emperor had some strange interest in such things? Chun refocused, returning to the matter at hand, and asked if Kyo-mu had seen the monster in the prison. Kalmo nodded and described it, saying the monster was a cat with a tri-colored coat of white, black and yellow. It was just an ordinary cat, appearing next to a prisoner who died in the prison. The cat's master absorbed the dead's energy and grew larger than a human, but as far as he saw, it didn't harm anyone. Yen explained that wherever there was a death, the Wu Chang monster would appear. Some of the deceased have fatal wounds that looked like claw marks, which could have been caused by either a cat or a tiger monster. Chao Mu, however, disagreed and suggested that the Wu Chang might not be actual culprit. Ing asked why he felt that way, and Chao Mu replied that the cat monster was merely attracted to the energy of the dead, and others had mistaken it for the one responsible for the murders. You then asked if he was implying that there might be another monster at play. The scene shifted to the lunar fairies, who were standing in front of a giant white tiger, which had long wings. Two of the fairies stood against, commenting that it was too ferocious for them to handle. It always went out of control whenever Mengyu left, and they couldn't deal with it. Mengyu arrived and told them to be quiet. She reminded them that it was their responsibility to watch over the spirit beast. If the lady saint found out, they had been taking proper care of her beast. During her seclusion, they would all be in trouble. Menu calmed the tiger, thinking of the fairies as a bunch of idiots. She wondered how she was supposed to show her competence if the tiger wasn't even under control. She also noted that the lady Sink would be in seclusion for another month, so there was no immediate worry. If she could use these models to capture the cat monster Wuchang, she would surely rise in rank within the faction. At night, ING spoke with all the constables, informing them that the goal of the operation was to capture the unpredictable beast. Last night, Cao Mo had spotted it near the West Prison, so their search would focus on the western side of the city. She instructed them to follow the plan and search the area. Everyone agreed and left as Cao Mo ventured off alone. The cat emerged from his shadow. Grabbing his leg, Chao Mu moved his hand to swipe it away, muttering that, as he suspected, ever since the cat had left the prison last night and been following him, he remarked on how clingy it was, and wondered if the cat saw him as its long-term meal ticket. The way it sneaked around reminded him of Snow, though she was much cuter than the cat. Just then ING approached and asked what you were doing. And you going to tell her about the cat? Before Chao Mu could respond, the cat quickly scurried away. Chao Mu followed it, noting that's the demon cat. They tracked it toward the western outskirts, where Ing suggested they follow it, while she would block its escape on the right. But as they neared, the cat suddenly veered left and jumped down. They arrived in front of a house, but the cat had disappeared. Chao Mu thought to himself that the cat was incredibly agile and could have easily evaded them, yet it had stayed within sight, almost as if it was deliberately leading them somewhere. Ing wondered about the place ahead of them, and Chao Mu asked if she knew the area. She replied that the authorities had investigated it before, and confirmed that it was the territory of a small, new gang called the Crimson Water Gang. Their leader, Jiang Long, was a grade 6 martial artist, and he was not someone to be underestimated. Chao Mao could smell a heavy scent of blood coming from the area. Earlier at the courtyard of the Crimson Dragon Hall, Jiang Long had introduced himself as the leader of the Crimson Water Gang. He had greeted Meng Yu, the Immortal Master, and expressed his honor in serving the Shen-Tian sect, one of the 9 immortal clans. He requested that she help him join the sect to train and learn the path to eternal life, promising to follow her orders unconditionally. Min Yu had looked at him and, seeing his sincerity, told him that she would give him a chance. However, she added that there were countless martial artists eager to join the immortal sect, so she could not agree so easily. He needed to pass her trial before she would accept him. She then revealed a box labeled Beastmaster and pulled out a white jade token, explaining that such tokens reflected a martial artist's internal energy. She wanted to test Jiang Long's combat abilities. Don't worry, she told him. The trial will be brief and shouldn't cause much disturbance. Jiang Long stared at the white jade token, and Meng Yu wondered if he was afraid. She told him that he could always give up, but he desired eternal life. With that, he summoned his power, surrounding his body with red rays, and assured her that he wasn't afraid of accidentally killing the white tiger. He promised he could keep it under control. However, after some time, Jiang Long was heavily injured by the tiger and begged Mingyu for help. She calmly replied, "The unpredictable beast only appears to those who are close to death." The death energy surrounding someone like him, a grade 6 martial artist, was strong enough to draw it in. If he die, the death energy will dissipate quickly and the beast will leave. Just then the white tiger's eyes suddenly glowed and Mengyu grew tense. The beast had always obeyed after being fed blood offerings, but now she wondered, could it be that the strength of Jiang Long, a grade 6 martial artist, had triggered the tiger's ferocity? Suddenly Mengyu heard a meow from behind her. She turned around and said, as expected, before calling to the cat, "Surrender." But before she could react, the white tiger charged toward the cat. Meng Yu realized with alarm that the tiger had gone berserk, and if anyone discovered it, there would be serious consequences. Just then the tiger and the cat appeared before Kam Yu and Yang, both of whom were shocked to see the confrontation, and quickly instructed Xiao Mu to follow her, and the two of them entered the area. They realized they were too late, and Yang speculated that the white tiger demon was likely a spiritual beast, raised by the Qianti insect. Spiritual beasts were typically controlled by cultivators, and the beast master must have been involved. Kilmu understood what she was implying. that the mastermind behind the unpredictable beast was the Shen Tian sect at that moment. The white tiger attacked the cat, and Kilmu swiftly jumped in to protect, rising to his feet heroically. He commented that was cool, and he saved the cat, but before he could react further, the white tiger lunged at him. In the nick of time, Ing rushed forward, pulling him away just as the tiger's strike hit the ground. She noted that the tiger demon was incredibly strong, and they were no match for it. However, she was fast enough to stall it for a while, and urged Chimu to go find reinforcements. With a swift motion, Ing threw him aside, and as the white tiger charged toward her, Xiaomu unleashed his demonic body dissolution attack, enveloping the beast in red rays. He turned to Ing and with a hint of regret, apologized and tell he couldn't let him steal my kill. Ing urged Xiaomu to go and find reinforcements, but he refused, telling her that she should be the one to find them, while he handled the white tiger. Meanwhile, Sing watched the scene unfold from the roof of a nearby building, wondering if they had lost their minds. The tiger could have easily escaped, and now it seemed they were all headed for certain death. The emperor had ordered an investigation into Gao Mu, warning that it wouldn't be good if he just died there. After all, the real culprit behind the tiger monster's murder was still at large. Sing's gaze shifted to Mengyu, standing on the roof of another building. Mengyu coldly remarked that mere mortal constables were getting in her way. She instructed them to report to her the moment they found the monster. She couldn't believe someone would be so eager to die. To her, a grade 6 martial artist was nothing more than an appetizer for the tiger, and once it finished eating, she would reclaim it. Sing realized that the emperor wasn't willing to start a conflict with the immortals at the moment, and that he could bring trouble if he acted recklessly. After a moment's thought, he decided to wait for the right opportunity. Back below, the tiger attacked Xiao Mu with its claws, injuring him slightly. Xiao moved remiss, realizing just how powerful the beast was. A single swipe had broken through his energy barrier, but the rewards for dying under the tiger's claws would be great, he thought, and he began to hope the tiger would use its strongest move to finish him off. The white tiger launched its attack, and Xiao Mu, relieved, thought he would die there. However, Yin arrived just in time, urging him to move by asking why he was standing still. She told him he must dodge the attack. Kalmu wished she would simply get out of his way and let him die. Yen explained that the tiger monster was incredibly strong, and that facing it head-on would be suicide. Instead, they had to rely on their movement techniques to control the fight, and wait for an opportunity to deliver a killing blow. She would teach him the mental technique called shadow step. He needed to closely watch her movements and memorize the mantras. Yang demonstrated, instructing him to focus his chi into his feet, allowing divine will to flow through. Tread on the false as if it were real, and the solid as if it were empty. She said the chi would circulate around the body in a continuous cycle. Xiao Mu, frustrated, thought it was pointless to try learn in such a situation. Yet, as he was about to dismiss her attempt to teach him, the tiger attacked again, forcing them both to retreat. Ing drove her sword and slashed at the creature, but she knew the monster's inner energy was so powerful that even ordinary blades were ineffective. Although they could avoid its attacks using the shadow step, there was little else they could do. If this continued, they would surely lose, even if Kumu mastered the technique. Meng, who remarked that they had greatly overestimated themselves, noting that the creature they faced was a virtual being. Sent by the lady, it was immune to both water and fire, and no weapon could pierce its defenses. He advised them to stay put and accept their fate, as being devoured by such a creature would be considered an honor. For mortals like Palmu, however, Kyomu, now fully mastering the shadow step technique, rushed forward with determination. He activated the celestial demon dismantling technique, combining it with his newfound speed. As he prepared to strike, he saw the tiger preparing to attack. Inin, aware of the danger, called to Kyomu, urging him to leave. He couldn't defeat the beast. Just as the tiger lunged, Chimu noticed his current skill points were 204, with 126 required for the attack. He used those points, then leaped into the air, delivering a powerful kick to the tiger that struck the ground with immense force. Sing, observing from a distance, was astonished by the sheer power of Xiao Mu's strike. The inner energy behind it was far stronger than that of a class 6 martial artist. Xiao Mu had merged the celestial demon dismantling technique with a rapid movement technique, amplifying its power many times over. His fighting style showed a complete disregard for his own well-being. In reflecting on Chao Mi's technique, realized that the shadow step, which her ancestors had developed for concealing their movements and fast maneuvers, was always meant to be used with such intensity. She wondered if she had been practicing it incorrectly all this time. As Gao Yu was about to use his sword on the tiger, Meng Yu arrived, saying that the tiger was the spiritual companion of the Shen Tian sex, Lady Saint, and that it should be returned to her immediately. Xiao Mu wondered why Meng Yu cared about the rules of the immortal sect. The beast had already taken many lives, and according to the law of the imperial court, that was punishable by death. Without hesitation he attacked the tiger. Yang, watching from a distance, thought Xiao Mu had actually killed it. She was baffled, wondering how a mere martial artist could accomplish something that not even the reigning emperor dared to do. Meng, who was equally stunned, Xiao Mu standing firm, explained that the evil beast had already earned the punishment of death, but those who allowed it to continue rampaging and showed total disregard for the lives of others deserved to die as well. Ming Yu shouted at him, declaring that mere mortals had no place interfering in the affairs of the immortal faction. He accused Chimu of audacity, falsely accusing him, and claimed that it was he who deserved the punishment of death. Ying then arrived and asked Ming Yu to explain herself. Was she there to capture the beast or to let it run free? Ming Yu turned, exuding pressure, and told Ying she was being presumptuous. She questioned if Ying thought she could ask an immortal to report every action to her. She had acted without permission, or even the knowledge of the immortal faction, and had brutally killed the spiritual beast of the Lady Saint. Ying would pay for that later. With that, Ming Yu left Ying standing firm, muttered that the immortals would get what was coming to them for disregarding the lives of others and the law. Xiao Mu coughed and collapsed to the ground. Ying rushed to him concerned and checked if he was okay. He weakly asked her not to save him. She promised to do whatever she could to help him, but he insisted. The next day, a cat perched on a tree branch outside the city. Watching the landscape, the cat remarked that, unlike the meager death energy absorbed from others, the energy from the constable was so full, it was pure, almost unbelievable, and he had even saved her the previous night. That was why she felt so special to him and why she loved him. It was a shame that the constable had been gravely wounded by the tiger monster. The cat had followed them all the way back to their office, but they were too late. He had already died. That was why her diet consisted of death energy. It was her only sustenance, and she felt no respect for others. Anyone who caught her eye would die soon, and she would remain a lonely soul for the rest of her life. Suddenly something fell nearby, startling her. It was someone who had revived, and she wondered why he was now lying on top of the tree. The cat was in disbelief, thinking, wasn't he dead? She rushed to him, wrapping her arms around him. He tugged at her ears, asking if she was ever going to leave him alone. He joked that she could be his mascot, given how much she liked him. He then checked his rating and found it was only a B+. Despite all his efforts, the reason he thought was that his death hadn't caused much of a scene, which was probably why it went unnoticed by most. Yang must have reported the incident. The fairy from the Shentian faction had allowed their leave to go on a killing spree, which was only stopped by Constable Xiao Mu at the cost of his own life. Wasn't that heroic enough? He realized that unless someone suppressed the news midway, no one would have known the full story. He couldn't help but think about how arrogant those cultivators were, knowing that the imperial court wouldn't dare move against them, if the government wouldn't do anything, and it was his time to take action. After all, he was no longer a constable. Chimu focused on himself, reflecting that, ever since he had made small progress in his immortality punch training, he had been receiving vitality rewards every time he revived. However, his appearance hadn't changed much. He wondered if this was because his vitality had stabilized at his peak level, and while reviving consumed his remaining lifespan, mastering the immortality punch was helping to extend. As he pondered further, he realized that he had made significant progress with the technique, and wonder how many more years he had left. He decided to take the cat with him, change his outfit, and set out to catch the culprit. Within Shen Tian faction, the cat named Wu Chong agreed to follow him into his shadow. Upon reaching the Shen Tian faction, Xiao Mu noted that it used to be the heart of the Xiao family's power, but now it was the 15th generation, and there were many pilgrims at the faction. burning incense and honoring the gods. As he walked through the area, he noticed an old lady begging a man for help. She explained that a few days ago, a monster had killed her son and daughter-in-law, and her granddaughter, traumatized, was hiding in a cabinet. The old lady begged the man to help her granddaughter, promising to burn incense every day in return. The man replied, telling the old lady that there should be no commotion in the Immortals fraction, as the superior, a fifth-rank civil official, was still inside offering incense. He instructed her to wait the back of the line, as the Immortals were busy inside. Someone was asking for his son to be bestowed upon his 9th concubine. The old lady, desperate, knelt before the man and explained that she couldn't wait. Her granddaughter was the only family she had left, and she begged him to help. The man shouted, telling her once again to wait the back of the line. He warned her not to blame him if she continued causing a disturbance. At that moment, Manhwa appeared and asked if the old lady had told the truth, that her daughter-in-law and son had been killed by a monster. The old lady nodded, explaining that her granddaughter had passed out when it happened, and only woke up that morning still unresponsive. She feared that her granddaughter's soul had been eaten by the monster. Manhwa frowned and said seemed like a case of a lost soul. She then instructed the old lady to follow her to the inner chamber, promising to treat the girl herself. The old lady, overwhelmed with gratitude, thanked her for her help. However, Kilmu intervened, telling the old lady to stop. He declared that the one who allowed the monster to commit so many murders was none other than Manhwa herself. Manhwa looked at Xiao Mu, confused and astonished. How had he ended up there completely unharmed? Wasn't he supposed to have been killed just the day before? The onlookers began whispering, wondering if Xiao Mu was referring to the Wu Chang monster incident, where many people had died. One person voiced disbelief, noting that the goddess of the Zhuangshan faction had been keeping the city safe all this time, so it couldn't be true that she allowed the monster to commit the murders. Manhwa then asked Xiao Mu directly, was he Xiao Mu the constable from the city government? She reminded him that, as an official of the government, he was supposed to follow the proper channels. She demanded evidence for his accusations, questioning how he could accuse her of permitting the beast's actions. Without proof, a man in the crowd agreed, asking how Xiao Mu could make such serious accusations without evidence. After all, he was just a constable attempting to capture an immortal fairy, a task that even the emperor would never dare attempt. Another person warned, "Oh, speak out of turn, Ming." He responded calmly, telling the crowd that Xiao Mu was there, making false accusations because of some past issues between them. As a government official, he had no right to enter the Immortals faction without permission. Not only had Xiao Mu broken the rules, but he had also attempted to tarnish the reputation of her faction. She pondered aloud how he should be punished for his actions. Just as the tension grew, the girl who had been silent suddenly spoke up. She pointed toward Meng Huang and said, "Tiger and her parents." Her grandmother reassured the girl, telling her not to worry because she was there. Manhwa began trembling, and people wondered if the girl was pointing at her. Some speculated that it had something to do with the Shen-Tian sect, while others wondered if she had truly unleashed the beast to kill those people, and what would happen if the sect found out. Manhwa silenced them, commanding them to be quiet, saying that a group of mortals dared to slander her. She threatened them, asking if they wanted to die. Season pointed at Kyle Mu, declaring that, as an official enforcer of the law, leading a disturbance in the immortal sect was punishable by death. He warned that none of them would leave alive, and that everyone in the Yemen would be implicated. Kaimu clarified that he wasn't a law enforcer, introducing himself instead as the brother of Kaimu, though in truth he was the same person. He explained that since mortal law couldn't manage immortals, he would handle the situation himself. He then attacked her with a spear. A man stepped in to stop him, drawing his sword and calling him an ignorant fool, asking how he dared lay a hand on her. He threatened to tear Xiao Mu into 8 pieces, and use his power to launch multiple sword attacks. Xiao Mu, unfazed, taunted him to bring it on, confident in the strength of the immortal set. He soon realized the man was a martial artist, and wondered why he was acting as a lackey for the immortal set. The man shouted that martial artists were just mere mortals, and he sought the true, immortal techniques of the Shen Tian sect to achieve eternal life. Killing Chemu would earn him credit, and the reward would surely allow him entry into the inner sect. In rage, she declared that he would now unleash his ultimate technique, Heavenly Demon Disintegration. Chao Mu punched him, sending him crashing against the wall with brutal force. Leaving him stuck in it, Chao Mu then, calmly, stated that he knew the Heavenly Demon Disintegration technique. As well behind him, Meng Yu chanted a spell, summoning spiritual energy that surrounded Chao Mu. He tried to break free only to realize that his spear had melted down. He understood it was the power of immortal techniques. Soon a few more attacks hit him, and he screamed in pain, as the energy burned his hand and scorched his body. Meng Yu smirked, asking how it felt. She explained that it was the bone-corroding fire talisman, a gift from the saintess. Normally, she didn't dare use it, but its fire could corrode the soul and burn the bones. A single touch would bring eternal suffering. She revealed that the fire would keep burning until the target was reduced to ashes. It was the punishment for defying the immortal set. Despite the agony, the man struggled to move and gritted his teeth, saying it was unquenchable. He dared her to let it burn, stating that either way she would die. That day, he prepared to unleash the Heavenly Demon Disintegration once more. Meng Hu was shocked and asked, "If he gets insane, why would a mere mortal oppose an immortal like me?" He replied, "As an immortal, she had committed countless evil deeds and now act like a demon. Even if he died today, he will ensure that righteousness still exists in the world." He then introduced himself as a member of the Chao family, challenging the immortal sect, and he will drag her into the flames with himself. Meng Yu laughed coldly, thinking it impossible, and she was immortal, so how could she die at the hands of a mere mortal? She then thought to herself, "Why isn't anyone coming to save me?" Chao Mu, struggling against the pain, thought to himself that it was a good thing he had invested all his points into the Eternal Life Fist, or he wouldn't have survived the bone-corroding fire, even though his body was nearing its limit. At least this way Meng Hu wouldn't have the chance to harm the grandmother and granddaughter. Again, killing a mortal in front of everyone would make him a legend. Plus, dying in such a dramatic fashion should earn him a high evaluation score. Suddenly a dagger was thrown, slashing at him before quickly retreating. He screamed in agony, and the crowd murmured that the Xian insect had come to take their revenge. They watched in shock as the flames surrounding Xiao Mu's body disappeared, revealing that his hand had been severed. Minyu remarked that the flames around Kailmu had disappeared, attributing it to heaven's blessings. She declared that Kailmu had defeated the wicked immortal, performing a truly noble deed. The evil immortal's fire could not burn him. Chomu glanced at the sword and realized that it was just a flying dagger that had made the fire vanish, and severed his hand, which had been touched by the flames. Once the source of the fire was removed, it naturally ceased. It seemed that the one who had acted wasn't trying to help her team, but was actually trying to save him. They could have intervened sooner, but if they had, he would have already been dead. His clothes were burned beyond recognition, and he asked the crowd could someone lend him a pair of pants. Several people hurried to remove their pants, offering them to him. They praised his valiant act in slaying the immortal, saying it was truly commendable. One person even offered Xiao Mu their family's heirloom underwear, saying, "If you don't mind, you can take this." Another replied that he would better keep it for himself. Camus responded, "The Qian sect won't let this slide. They should all leave quickly to avoid getting caught up in it." The group, still concerned, asked why he wasn't coming with them. Xiao Mei reassured them, saying to don't worry and he have my own way to escape. Even immortals were no match for me. They agreed, wishing him well and urged him to take care of himself. Cal Mu looked at the trees and said everyone was gone. Could the expert in the forest reveal themselves? He was to kindness and it must be repaid. Singh, who was a lord, responded that his orders were to save Chao Mu, though he didn't seem particularly grateful. The man agreed, explaining that Chao Mu was unpredictable, and wondering why he would risk his life for something as trivial. As a demonic beast, he questioned why Chao Yu would clash with an immortal over it. Xiao Yu urged them to come out, insisting that he really needed to thank them properly. Xing spoke again, saying that even a warrior must uphold justice in the world, but as an emperor he could not afford to go against the tide. How could he live up to the responsibility of being the son of heaven? He explained that even if he was willing to die for the cause, his reasoning came from a position of greater responsibility, so it was only natural that he acted cautiously and did not recklessly throw away his life. Chow Mu countered, wondering what good silent endurance was, and said he would rather live freely, repaying kindness and easing the wrongs. But that was enough for him, and he asked the man to take him away, to ensure that Shentian sect wouldn't target him. The man agreed, saying he couldn't bear to see a righteous man suffer. Singh also agreed suddenly. Both of them sensed something was wrong. The scene shifted to a quiet place where two people were playing baduk. One of them spoke, saying, "It's already too late. Mengyu was dead. The bone-crossing flame talisman was used, and that she still died at the hands of that mortal warrior. She was always vying for attention despite her lack of talent, and she deserved the disaster. But still she brought shame to our Shentian sect." The second man wondered aloud. Wasn't senior brother Chang the one overseeing Shentian temple that year? But he's been off wandering, and he supposed that responsibility falls to them now. He paused, then added, "It makes sense after all. Swan Tian Temple was a pilgrimage site, and if they don't deal with that warrior, the incense offerings will surely decline and will be punished." Just then they saw a beam of light rising from the top of the mountain. One of them said, "Looks like they don't need to meddle further. Let's continue our game." The first man agreed, saying since the bone-corrosive flame talisman was used, naturally she would come. A figure appeared in the sky, soaring toward Cao Mu. It was the holy maiden of the Shentian sect. Wu Kingston. She hovered nearby and asked that who he was. Cao Mu, taken aback, wondered to himself what school was she from. If she's the martial saints Lin Shi'art, she should only respond to the martial union members. Why did he react to a mirror cultivator will? Kingston spoke again, her voice firm. That she's someone seeking justice and truth. May she ask who he was? She mentioned that it was incredibly boring in the immortal sects, where even when they were wrong, they were always right. She then attacked him with flares to make him feel some pain, and remarked that the attack was 10 times stronger than Mengyu's flame. She also suggested that this must mean the lady was the holy maiden. It was a perfect day, the 15th, an auspicious day for offerings to the gods. Let's see if the mortal's offering pleases the heavens, she added. King thought that Chelmu's residence with the martial saints Lin Shi'art was intriguing. Had the martial union fallen so low that they were sending a 6th-rank warrior to stir up trouble? The death of Mengyu seemed insignificant, but she was still one of her own, and at a time like this King couldn't afford even a shred of weakness. She sensed the presence of 2 individuals in the forest, but decided to leave, thinking it wasn't the right time to cause trouble. Chow Mu revived and was playing with her cat. The cat thought it had found a treasure in her, someone who could endlessly resurrect, and was surrounded by such rich death energy. To the cat it was heaven. Chow Mu told it to stop gorging on the death energy, and at least help out in a fight sometimes. The cat responded, thinking that while she wasn't good at fighting, she could certainly be adorable. Chow Mu realized that the reward had been decent, and he figured it had been worth dying for. His dantian and chi were swelling. He had already reached the 4th rank as a warrior, and with just one more step, he would begin refining his spirit. The techniques he had for spirit refining included the longevity fist, the force refining chapter, and the Per-Yang limitless art, but both were incomplete. The martial saints Lin Shi'art was a basic spirit refining method for lower rank warriors, though it was different from true spirit refining martial arts. He suspected that the Shentian sects Holy Maiden resonated with the Lin Shi'art, which suggested she had ties the martial union. He needed to investigate her and see if he could find the 2nd volume of the Longevity Fist, the Spirit Refining chapter. As he was concentrating on his thoughts, he suddenly sensed something. The scene shifted to the Spirit Spring at King's residence, where she was taking a bath. She sensed something too, and thought that someone from the martial union had infiltrated. King sensed that at a certain mountain villages, Saintess temple people were worshipping. They prayed the Saintess above the sacred flame burns brightly. Please bless the holy village, dispel illness and drive out the evil spirits. King thought to herself that the efficiency of absorbing energy was too low, and to break through to the foundation establishment stage, she still needed more. Then she sensed something else. It seemed that someone from the martial extreme society had sneaked in. It was Chow Mu, accompanied by a small girl. He covered her mouth and looked at the temple, remarking that he had never imagined the Saintess of the Kachawanshan sect would live in such an ordinary place. After seeing the group of martial slaves at the gate, he strongly suspected that the Saintess wasn't as impressive as they claimed. The girl kept her mouth shut, but she spoke, saying she had only been forced into the position by her father. She told Xiao Mu to take his grievances to the source, explaining that it was the saintess who had burned him, and she was innocent. Xiao Mu made it clear by threatening her. He would take her with him, unless she answered his questions truthfully. Terrified, she agreed, saying she would tell him everything. Xiao Mu released her, saying that he trusted her now, but he warned her not to try anything funny. She quickly assured him that she wouldn't, added that her father was the prefect of training. If Xiao Mu spared her, she promised that her father would arrange the finest rewards for him. Xiao Mu, unimpressed, told her to stop wasting time, and asked about the background of the saintess. She explained that the saintess used to be the disciple of the martial saint Wu Kixin and was also his adopted daughter. Xiao Mu frowned. Wasn't the martial saint the most anti-immortal sect person? Haven't his adopted daughter end up in one? The girl sighed and tell you wouldn't understand. And around 40 years ago the martial saint was defeated by an immortal. After that he resigned from office, founded the Martial Extreme Society and vanished. Even the elders of our sect couldn't find him. As martial arts declined, the major martial families were swallowed up by the Martial Extreme Society. Scattered martial artists had no path forward. Then about a decade later, our saintess joined the immortal sect. Though she cultivated as a martial artist, her talent in immortal techniques was extraordinary. Within 5 years she had far surpassed her peers. Later the elders selected her as the saintess to set an example for all martial artists. From then on, more and more martial artists defected to the immortal sects, and even though my father forced him into the sect, he actually joined because of her. Xiao Mu was frustrated, thinking that the attempt to win hearts was a clever move. No wonder martial artists were willing to serve as lackeys for immortal sects. However, cultivating immortality was no easy task, and martial artists in these sects were often little more than lowly servants, with no access to the core of cultivation. Since King joined the Ascension sect over a decade ago, the Cow family massacre was likely unrelated to her, and there was probably no longevity fist technique involved. He then asked how much she knew about the Martial Extreme Society, whether she had practiced any martial techniques, or if King had taught her anything. The girl responded that it was due to her own lack of ability, and that she wasn't qualified for such teachings, but she would work harder. She raised her spirit beasts, took care of her daily needs, and sacrificed eating, drinking, and sleeping, believing this would earn her favor. He remarked that the immortal sect felt more like a cult, and questioned whether they were brainwashing people now. He then asked her what level King was. The girl replied that Qing was exceptionally gifted, and her retreat was nearing a breakthrough to foundation establishment. Just then Xiao Mu noticed something and quickly pulled the girl back. As the flares arrived to attack, it was King who attacked and told him to speak less. Mu replied that if he hadn't acted quickly just now, that little girl would have been reduced to ashes. He questioned whether the Sintis saw human lives as mere ants. As King recalled who he was, Mu introduced himself as the brother of the one she had burned to ashes. He mentioned that the Cow family was loyal and brave, dedicating themselves to the country's well-being. He was there for revenge. She attacked him again, but he dodged it, telling her to relax, as he was joking as a fellow member of the Martial Extreme Society. He asked why she was so angry. He thought that he couldn't let himself die so soon, as he still needed to extract more information from her. She called him a fool, claiming he would die at the hands of the martial saint sooner or later, and she might as well free him now. He wondered what she meant, saying he had never met the martial saint, and questioning why they would want to kill him. Was it possible that he had something to do with her student? It became clear that it was the martial saint's spiritual residence technique they had both practiced. She used the technique to make the flares revolve around her, and Xiao Mu confirmed that his guess was correct. The technique creates a connection. She believed he was sent by the martial saint to kill her, accusing him of betraying the martial saint by joining the immortal sect in order to break free from the technique. Was she wrong? She replied that during the day, the flying fish guards had saved his life, and asked if he was working for the emperor. She also wondered if the martial saint had already infiltrated the great Yan emperor's inner circle. She then made a dagger fly toward him, and Chimu thought the flying dagger belonged to the flying fish guards, the experts who had saved him earlier that day. However, he had no connection to the emperor, and in fact he had even cursed the emperor. So why would they save him? She asked where the great Yen Emperor was. He considered telling her that he had no idea who the Emperor was, but would she believe him? She attacked him, claiming it was useless. He wondered what was wrong with her. She attacked the slightest disagreement. It seemed like he wouldn't get anything from her, so he considered retreating. Just as he turned to leave, the girl struck him from behind and apologized. With a slight motion of her lips, the flares reached him and burned him to ashes. The girl knelt before King, promising not to speak a word and to write to her father immediately, asking him to build more saintess temples and dedicate more offerings to King. King warned her to remember her place, and if she dared to speak out again, she would turn the entire Lu household into ashes. The girl agreed. King entered her mansion, where a green object was glowing and floating in the air. She observed that near Haiyang City, it seemed there was someone from the great Yen Emperor's flying fish guards. She instructed herself to continue cultivating diligently and reach foundation establishment soon. She thought about how the exo-ancient sect had been searching for the emperor for a long time, and the intelligence she had gathered would be a great contribution to the sect. She should be able to exchange it for pills to aid her cultivation, and she needed to increase her strength quickly. One day she would join the ranks of the immortals in the Xuanhuan sect. The scene shifted to a restaurant, where a storyteller was telling the crowd that Xiaomu had been consumed by a strange flame, becoming nothing more than a martyr's incense amidst the firelight. It was said that even as he burned, his spirit still echoed with the incense of a mere mortal. Good immortals bore it without hesitation. Meanwhile, Kuomyu was sitting in the back reflecting on the situation. He remarked that it was incredibly satisfying to listen to others praising while drinking tea, but being a burden hurt deeply. Twice he had been reduced to nothing, not even ashes left. Being burdened by death for a second time only earned him a C rating, which was a loss even though he wanted to die. He couldn't rise up pointlessly. He thought that the next time he met with King, he would send her on her way. Amused that he looked carefully, King seemed to fear the marshal, saying that she had boldly joined the immortal sect. It was likely that the martial saint had planted her there as part of some scheme while she was trying to escape his control. He wondered what had changed with the martial saint's spiritual residence technique. He wouldn't have known if he hadn't encountered it, but now he realized that Haiyang City was crawling with members of the martial extreme society. The scene shifts to the Shintian sect, located in the Nanzhao Qingming Mountains, where the elders were gathered. Elder Sun informs them that Xing has relayed the news that the Emperor of Dian has appeared in Haiyang City. Elder Tian clenches his fists, remarking that it seems their plan was halfway to success. Steward Chang of the Shentong insect mentions that in half a month, Emperor Yang will disguise himself as an ordinary pilgrim and ascend the main peak of King Mountain, kneeling before the statue of the immortals of the Shentong insect. However, he has been evading capture and hiding for the entire month, and Qian has been unable to reach him. This raises the question of whether the emperor might be planning to back out. At the last moment, Elder Sun explains that to conceal his movements, the sect master has been using the supreme treasure, the heavenly mirror station in Zhangzhou, to block the prying eyes of the other immortal sects. On the same day, he even ordered his Feihu guards to save a mere mortal martial artist who had broken into the Shintian temple. Elder Tian wonders if the sect master believes that his delicate balancing act was the reason he has managed to survive against the immortal sects for so long. The 9 immortal sects have stood above the clouds for centuries, and 40 years ago they wiped out Dan's elite forces, toppling an entire dynasty. To them it was nothing more than child's play. Steward King Yang agreed with Tian that the ancient texts stated that the mandate of heaven was bestowed upon emperors. They could neither attain immortality nor celestial destiny, and for cultivators like them, imperial authority was something to avoid at all costs. Thus they steered clear of it. Elder Sun acknowledged that avoiding imperial affairs was wise, but he also pointed out that it was unnecessary for cultivators to seek the throne themselves. What they truly desired were worldly resources, including offerings and faith. As for being an emperor, it was like being a monkey in a jungle of apes. Cultivators should seek to control the monkey king, not become one themselves. Elder Tian stood and declared that it didn't matter. In half a month, the emperor would kneel whether he wanted to or not. At that point, the Shen Tian sect would become the first immortal sect, to which the emperor of Dian bows, heralding a great revival, and taking the lead among the 9 immortal sects. Elder Sun cautioned that for now, it was best not to stir up unnecessary trouble. Sometimes they needed to give the emperor some leeway, to demonstrate their magnanimity. Since King had burned someone to death with the Lu of Flames, it was only right to use her actions to save face for the emperor. Qian asked if he meant that appointing King as the saintess was originally just a bait, to draw out the martial saint and crush him completely. However, after so many years, the martial saint had not taken the bait. Another elder wondered if that was the reason they should keep her around. The scene then shifts to Xing, who approaches his lord and said he had thoroughly investigated, and Chao Mu has no connection to the Chao family of Haiyang, who were exterminated by the martial saint. Beyond that, rumors in Yen City suggest that the Cao family, father and son, were righteous men, carrying the spirit of ancient chivalry with a family motto. To die with honor, their family martial arts include the Heaven Demon disintegration technique, and an ancestral technique that disintegrates the body. Doesn't that sound like something destined for extinction? As he was about to continue, Xing noticed a red light in the sky and pointed it out. It was Cheyenne who had landed. Introducing himself, the man asked why Cheyenne had come. He explained that he had delayed his trip to King Ming. Traveling in disguise, how could his cover have suddenly been blown? Chaining replied that he came to urge the man to set out. With only half a month left, he would need to depart immediately if he was to reach the King Ming Mountains in time. Cheyenne also mentioned that just the day before, a mere mortal martial artist had broken into the Shentian temple, and he had heard that someone in the man's company, perhaps the Fei Yu guard, seemed to have been involved. Xing thought to himself that, on the previous day, he had used a regular throwing knife, with no markings of the Fei Yu guard, yet they had still identified him. He realized that Qing the marshal, Xing's disciple, was well versed in all martial arts under the heavens. She must have recognized his life-throwing technique, the Feiyu guard's signature flying star hand. The man felt that he had been careless, never expecting that despite his and Xing's caution, they would still expose themselves. He wondered if the Castellan Trian sect was using this as an excuse to pressure him into submission. The thought was outrageous, and he couldn't think of another way to avoid the kneeling ceremony. He then asked Chang for an explanation. Chan calmly replied that the incident from the previous day had been due to Saintess King's misjudgment. The Su Wan Tian sect was a righteous sect, conducting itself openly and justly, and they would handle the matter fairly. The Su Wan Tian sect had decided to strip King of her title as the Saintess and expel her from Hung City. The man was shocked by this, wondering what was going on. Could it be that the Shentian sect cultivators were more reasonable than the other immortal sects? Did they actually care about right and wrong? And what were they up to now? Qian flew away, saying that since the matter was resolved, the man should depart immediately, and that they would meet again in half a month, at the King Ming Mountains. With that, he soared off into the distance. However, the man sensed someone sneaking nearby. He quickly drew his sword and called out, demanding to know who was there. If the person didn't reveal themselves, the man threatened to kill them. It was Cao Mu who stepped forward, assuring the man that he meant no harm. He introduced himself again as being from the Cao family, and mentioned that he had heard. The man was the most well-informed storyteller in Hangang. Cao Mu had come to seek his help for some information. The man eyed him closely and asked was he really from the Cao family. As he spoke, he grabbed Cao Mu's hand, and he truly resembled the hero of his family. Cao Mu, surprised, asked who the man was. The man introduced himself as John Chun. He explained that back in Yen City, he had been publicly humiliated by the son of Gua, and it was thanks to Xiao Mu that he had been saved. He owed Xiao Mu his gratitude. Xiao Mu then realized who the man was, though he wouldn't have recognized him if Jiang Chun hadn't spoken. Jiang Chun continued, saying that ever since that incident, he had been spreading the word about righteous families, like the QIA family, inspiring more people to stand up against the corrupt court and deceitful immortals. Qiao Mu would come, not out of fear of offending the authorities or the immortal sects, but because he believed in the cause. Jiang mentioned that it was fine and catching him wouldn't be easy. He added that Qiao Mui must have noticed when he was chasing Jiang earlier, that he was no ordinary storyteller. Kyomui agreed, saying that Jiang was not just armed with a sword. His martial techniques were excellent, and he was certainly no ordinary person. Jiang revealed that he was part of the Tinko Tower. Cao Mo, indifferent, asked what it was. Jiang realized that Cao Mo had never heard of it and began to explain. He said that when the martial sink destroyed the old martial world, Tin Cao Tower had survived. Their leader was none other than the famed scholar, known as the 100-Knowing Scholar, who gathered information from all corners of the martial world. The weapon rankings, the cure list, and many other famous compilations originated from their leader. Xiaomu wondered if Jiang was from an intelligence group. Jake replied that it was somewhat like that, but recently, some board members of the tower had been making frivolous rankings, such as the Martial Beauties list, the worst scandals of the year, and the Jiangnan Brother Guide. This had tarnished Tingo Tower's reputation, which was probably why Kun. You hadn't heard of them. Chao Mu then became serious, asking Jiang to tell him more about those rankings. Jiang explained that he mainly dealt with spreading the truth of the martial world, so he didn't know much about those side projects. However, he mentioned that the Martial Saint Association, Star Profound Envoy, had recently been recruiting people who practiced the Martial Saint Spirit Rhinoceros technique. Jiang explained that the purpose was to fulfill their field orders, and anyone who succeeded would be rewarded with advanced techniques from the Martial Saint. The current target for the association was none other than the Saintess, who had betrayed the Martial Saint and joined the Shen Tian sect. Cao Mu, feeling a sense of danger, thanked Jiang, and told him that you would surely treat him to tea someday. As Cao Mu ran away, he thought to himself that it was no wonder so many members of the Martial Saint Association had suddenly appeared in Haiyang, all pursuing King. If Chao Mu could infiltrate that hunt, he might obtain the second half of the Longitude's fist, or even enter the Martial Saint Association himself. King's death would then surely be his. As Chao Mu sat sipping tea in the shop, he couldn't help but think that they were just cannon fodder in the pursuit of taking down King. It was then that a man approached him, casually, mentioning that he didn't seem to be from the Wuji Association, and asking if he was also there for cultivation techniques. Xiao Mu asked what he should call him and if the man needed something. The man replied, just call him Old Hu, and added, while we're waiting for the envoy, let's talk. Old Hu sat down and said that he seemed quite young, but he was already a 4th-grade martial artist, and if he had some superior internal martial arts techniques. He went on to explain that, to be honest, he had obtained his technique from the Wuji Association. Although they only had half of it, it was still remarkable. He also possessed a unique secret manual, and was willing to exchange insights with Chao Mu. Chao Mu responded that it sounded interesting, but since it was only half of the technique, Old Hu must deal with the Wuji Association more often. He thought about the other half, and realized that it seemed to be with the Wuji Association as well. Martial artists had to work for them if they wanted to progress further. Old Drew replied, even the half you have was impressive. In the past, top-tier techniques were monopolized by the major martial sects, and those with Everest-level talent couldn't even access the core techniques. Now, it seemed that simply completing the mission would grant them access. Half of a top-tier martial art was enough for many to practice for a lifetime. Chao Mu wondered why they had been sitting there for half an hour. Where was the key envoy of the Star Profound Order? When would they be sent out to hunt King? He couldn't help but think that if they hadn't shown up yet, perhaps they were all just scared. A man sitting nearby overheard him, and asked how Chimu dared to speak so disrespectfully of the envoy. He claimed that the envoy had a plan in place to deal with King, and that they should not speak so lightly of someone with such a bright future ahead. Oldu interjected, explaining that Qing was not only the holy maiden of an immortal sage, but also a disciple of the martial sage. She was skilled in using the Lihu talisman, and had recently burned a high-ranking martial artist alive. The man who was rumored to be from the Cao family had perished in this attack. Old Hu seemed curious about the Cao family's story. He noted that the family had insulted the emperor, and yet had come out unscathed. At that moment someone arrived, their face hidden beneath a strange hat. They spoke coldly, telling everyone that if they were afraid, they were free to leave the martial sage. would only pass on his techniques to those with the most merit, and fewer rivals meant more chances for each of them to shine. The first man and old who then began to argue and fight. Meanwhile, the second man, sensing an opportunity, threw a punch at Kaimu. However, he quickly found that Kaimu had already activated the iron shirt technique, rendering the blow ineffective. The man raised his fist, demanding that Kaimu show him his iron divine fist. Believing that his toughness could overpower, he continued throwing punches at Chimu, who blocked them while thinking that the man's relentless force and boxing skills were impressive. Despite this, Chimu remained evenly matched with him. Defeating the man wouldn't be difficult. But Chimu's attention was drawn to the person standing at a distance, wearing a strange hat. The aura around him signaled that he was an expert. Everyone else seemed enormous as well, which was why no one dared provoke him. Given this, Kyomu decided to take the risk and make the first move. He drove his spear and struck the boxer with it, sending him crashing into the wall. With a quick motion, Kyomu rushed to attack the expert. The man unsheathed his sword, but Kyomu's spear easily broke it. The man then smiled and said he could have gone for a killing blow, but he held back on purpose. He was clearly testing their strength. Guiding them to make a move, Chaomu, unfazed, asked if he was the star profound in void. Everyone stopped fighting upon hearing this. The man, intrigued, asked how Chimu had figured it out. Chimu replied that several of the practiced the martial sage's Linksy technique, making it hard to distinguish them from one another. But upon closer inspection, his aura far exceeds theirs. The most telling sign, however, was the star profound order token he carried, which belongs to the Wuji Association. The man wondered if his earlier strike had exposed his cloak, without him even noticing it. He then appreciated Kyomui's sharp observation and asked for his name. Kyomui introduced himself, deciding to stick with the alias he had chosen. When Old Who overheard this, he asked if Kyomui was truly from the family he had been talking about. Recently, Kyomui confirmed, mentioning that the person who had been burned alive was his brother. The star profound envoy understood that Xiao Wu was here to avenge his brother. He warned that the mission wouldn't be easy, and that weak martial artists would only throw away their lives. He apologized for his earlier probing, and added that the mission would be difficult, as everyone present was a 4th-grade martial artist. Together they would kill the traitor king and reap the great reward. The envoy's kindness was evident, and they assured him they would do their utmost to carry out the mission. He mentioned that horses were prepared at the inn, and since time was of the essence, they should depart immediately. As they mounted their horses, Komu wondered where Thing was. She didn't seem to be in the city, as he couldn't sense her presence. The star profound envoy reassured him, telling him not to worry. Gowan handed Kyomyo a chung, and along with several other 4th-grade martial artists, went ahead to locate her old, who then mentioned that he knew one of the martial artists who was with them. He was a renowned master, an expert in hard techniques and life-risking fighting styles. Surely he was one of the top-tier 4th-grade martial artists. The man explained that the limit of inner energy was the 4th grade, but Chung had mastered the martial sage's Link-Si technique. The martial sage had stated that this technique was the touchstone for martial artists aspiring to transcendence. Chao Mu referred to him as a formidable fighter. They then saw a person completely surrounded by flares, and the man introduced him as Su Chung. Old Who remarked that Su Chung, using wooden stakes, had once burned a witch alive, which was a ruthless act. Chao Mu noted that Ching Chung had likely used such tactics to intimidate them. Old Who asked how Chao Mu knew so much about it. Chao Mu replied that his family had conducted extensive research on such matters, and added that being burned alive twice had given him some unique experience. The man then mentioned that a new signal had been received, and that in the depths of the forest lay villages Rick's king was hiding. He suggested they charge in. With that, they all prepared to fight their way ahead. A scene shifted to the Holy Maiden village at night, where Thing stood in front of a statue, reflecting on the words that the main path gives rise to 50, of which heaven was involved in 49, leaving one to be hidden by humans. She was burdened with guilt, thinking about how she had been expelled from the set for her mistakes and had lost her status as the Holy Maiden. She reminded herself that every hardship was a test, and if she could return to King Ming Mountain, to the Xuanjin sect headquarters, she could still become a disciple of the sect. But it seemed impossible, as they knew she would be killed by the Wuji Association if she left the Kashuan Mansion Temple, and they had even taken her magical artifact. It was clear they wanted her to go to King Ming Mountain, but they never intended for her to return alive. A boy approached her and asked if she was the Holy Maiden. He said his mother had told him that she had saved them all, and was truly a kind immortal. She wondered if the magistrate had sent the refugees of the Holy Maiden village to offer her services and tribute. A woman named Lin approached the boy and asked how he had arrived there, then apologized to King for the intrusion. The boy explained that the Holy Maiden had stepped out of the painting. Lin told the boy to go find his mother and not wander around at night. He agreed and left. Qing then asked Lin if she had brought the boy into the village. Lin replied that she had, as they were all refugees from other places. Starving and pitiful, she had taken them in, and later the magistrate from the city had sent money and people, helping the village settle down. It had been many years since then, and Lin asked if King was doing well. King, in a soft tone, called her mother and agreed with the statement. However, Lin still addressed her as Holy Maiden, and remarked that she must be joking. How could a commoner like her be the mother of a goddess, she said. She went on to explain that she had had a daughter in the past. King then asked if that daughter had died. Lin paused and King began to recount the past. She spoke of the time when the martial saint attacked all the sects to seize their secret manuals. When the martial saint came for the Lin family, Qing's mother had handed her over to him, as she had remarkable martial arts potential, in an attempt to protect the family. However, despite her sacrifice, the Lin family couldn't be saved. The martial saint only took her in to use her as a tool for martial arts, exploiting her for power. Lin was shocked and couldn't understand how this could have happened, especially since the person had promised her something else. King explained that by defying the laws of martial arts, the martial saint had no regard for human laws or lives. She had joined the immortal sect to escape his control, but now the sect had abandoned her. Despite this, she didn't blame her mother. About 10 years ago, Lin had established Holy Maiden Village to help King cultivate, but despite all her efforts, Ting still couldn't break through. Now she was being hunted by the Wujia Association, and could barely protect herself. She had come there simply to see her mother one last time. She then reflected that the title, Holy Maiden, was nothing more than wild grass. With weak family ties as she prepared to leave, Cain told her mother to take care of herself in the days ahead. Lin called her Holy Maiden and, apologizing for her boldness, earnestly asked for her blessings. The scene shifted to Kyomu and the others, who were standing in front of the village. The boxer commented that the village gave him the creeps, and wondered if they should just barge in. The bandaged man with the strange hat suggested that there was no need to rush, and that they should first discuss their plan. Chao Wu mentioned that someone was coming. They saw a group of people approaching, and wondered if it was reinforcements, but they relaxed when they realized it was just the villagers. A boy came forward and asked if they were looking for the Holy Maiden. Old Hu agreed and asked if the boy could take them there. The boy, caught in the midst of the flares, quickly realized that they were all bad people. He was about to touch Old Hu when Ku-Omyu tried to pull him away. Suddenly a flare ignited in Ku-Omyu's hand. Old Hu drew his sword to freeze the flame, preventing it from spreading. Chael Mu, impressed, commented that the one strike had taken it away, and he expressed his willingness to learn the technique. He asked Old Hu to teach him. Old Hu replied that he had simply removed the flaming outer layer. A small trick, but it didn't matter. He then mentioned that the demon woman must have sensed their presence, and set up an ambush. Xiao Mu, irritated, remarked on how shameless she was, using the children and brainwashing the villagers, making them beyond help. The villagers, each holding a fire note, vowed to protect King and were willing to die for her. They were burning the holy fire as a symbol of their loyalty, and even Lin was among them. The fire was approaching, and they realized it was the Lihu flame, a dangerous and powerful fire. They had no choice but to retreat to avoid being burned. Chang was using such despicable tactics, and it left them with little choice but to fall back. Meanwhile, Old Hu rushed forward to attack the villagers with his sword. Xiao Mu was once again impressed, marveling how Old Hu was able to cut through the flames. A man nearby explained that it was the Pao Ding Shi Nu blade technique, and Old Hu was a descendant of the blade master He went on to mention that before and after the Immortals War, the martial saint had ranked 11th on the martial hero list, with the 10th spot held by a blade master named Hu Chao Mu. Astonished wondered if Old Hu was even stronger than the martial saint. At that time, he jokingly said that he would like to challenge Old Hu someday. Old Hu focused on the battle, told the group that he would hold off the villagers, and King must be hiding nearby. It was up to them to deal with her. Lin, standing nearby, said that they had to protect King and would die without regret. As Old Hu attacked to push her away, Lin's eyes filled with tears. Meanwhile, inside the temple, King sensed something was wrong. She trembled, wondering if her mother was gone. A surge of faith power was overwhelming, and she couldn't understand why she hadn't died sooner. With so much faith power, she could surely use it to build her foundation. Suddenly the team of Cow Hu entered the temple, and one of the men said that Old Hu had been right. King was there. The boxer then commented that it was the end for King. He was about to strike her, boasting that victory was within his grasp. She wondered if he was seeking death, and then attacked him with a beam aimed at his neck. The other three drew their weapons to strike, but she swiftly divided herself into three using the shadow clone technique. Chao Mu understood what was happening and, confused, wondered if he had somehow ended up in the Konoha village. She clashed her sword with his spear. As he stabbed the spear toward her head, turned into flares. He realized the attack was powered by the Lihu talisman. The flames engulfed him and he screamed in pain. The others were also caught in the blaze. She stopped using the shadow clone technique and declared that the sinners had been ignited, destined to burn in the flames of hell for eternity. Breaking through the roof to escape, she proclaimed that the mortal world was filled with suffering and filth, and the Grand King dynasty was in ruins. The taxes in the capital were unbearable. Only the saints' village offered rebirth to the unfortunate, creating a true utopia on earth. People knelt before her, thanking her for appearing and guiding their souls to eternal bliss. They all chanted, proclaiming that the divine fire of the gods burned away the sins of the world, and that the holy fire consumed the remaining impurities, guiding souls to eternal peace. They continued repeating that the holy fire consumed everything, guiding them to everlasting tranquility. King smirked, declaring that it was impressive, but now she would break through to the foundation stage, with just a few insignificant ants. Did they really think they could kill her? How dare they even approach her, ready to throw away their lives? She watched as Cao Mu rushed toward her, wielding the heavenly demon disintegration technique. Meanwhile, Old Hu was slaughtering the others and realized the battle wasn't over. Suddenly he saw Chimu engaged in a fierce fight with King, and noticed that even though consumed by the flames, Chimu still had the strength and determination to battle on. King was surprised to see him and wonder how he had survived. Hadn't he been burned to death? Why was he still alive? Cao Mu responded that he had been ready to die, but she couldn't with that. He launched several powerful punches in her. She remarked that his rage was foolish and this battle was pointless. Did he truly believe he could defeat her with only his body? When he was reduced to ashes, victory would be hers. He got close to her, telling her that she wouldn't live long enough to witness what would happen next. The other three appeared surrounded by flames, and declared that Kumu was the kind of warrior they should all aspire to be. They suggested that they kill her together, put out the fire and die as one. They surrounded her, attempting to trap her in the flames as well. A blast erupted from their attack, knocking some of the others back, but Kilo Mu remained standing, sword in hands, still poised to strike. She remarked that it seemed she was never meant to walk the immortal path. Even if Hio Mu killed her, did he truly believe he would survive? He responded that the bone chorus of flame couldn't be extinguished, and everyone knew that. Killing her was justice for the countless crimes she had committed. She chuckled darkly, secretly preparing herself for her end, and taunted them. She called them fools for practicing the martial saint's spiritual residence technique, revealing that Kuomyu had been walking a dead-end path all along. She asked if he had ever wondered why those who practiced the martial saint's spiritual resonance technique could sense each other, or why not every martial artist could learn. She then explained the reason. It was originally designed by the martial saint to hunt down high-level martial artists, and the secret technique was specifically created for that purpose. She began recounting the past, explaining that 40 years after the Immortal War, the martial saint traveled across the 9 provinces, gathering 3,000 martial arts prodigies with extraordinary talent. These individuals became his disciples, and some were even adopted as his sons and daughters. The martial saint taught them the finest cultivation techniques and the most profound martial skills, including the martial saint's spiritual resonance technique. However, all who practiced the martial saint's spiritual resonance technique eventually became nothing more than stepping stones for the martial saint. He killed them all and absorbed their cultivation power. Out of the 3,000 disciples, Chimu didn't know how many had survived. Even if they hid at the ends of the earth, the martial saint would track them down, using his instincts and kill every last one of them. The world was vast, but from the martial world to the imperial court, from the mundane realm to the immortal sex, there was no escape for people like them. She spat out blood as he moved his sword, and then told him that he was listening to her words, so he might as well hear more. She asked if he didn't understand that they were merely stepping stones on the martial saint's path. It was hard to escape, and perhaps tomorrow would be Kale Mui's turn to die. She begged for mercy, claiming that she had found a way to break the curse and free them from the deathly shadow hanging over them all. Chao Mu simply withdrew his sword and she began to fall. Chao Mu remarked that if he were to die, anyone who killed him would only make him stronger. People wondered if the saintess was truly dead, but that seemed impossible. They rushed away declaring that she had ascended, not died from that day forward. They were no longer just the Holy Maiden's village. They had become the village of the Immortal Maiden. Chao Mu spoke of the inextinguishable fire, but he said it was no match for the fickleness of the human heart. He then asked his team if they were all right. A boy replied that he had nearly succumbed to the flames, but thankfully killing had weakened the fire significantly. One of the men mentioned that old Hugh was heavily injured and not in any condition to assist them. He urged everyone to channel their energy and hold on a little longer, suggesting they think of a way to extinguish the flames together. They meditated quietly, and Chio Mu reflected that they had all done their best. He had already sent one enemy to the grave and was just waiting for the final tally. Taking down a saintess should guarantee him a great score. Old Who called out to Skull Mu, praising him for killing King, considering it a major achievement. He admitted that there were few people he truly admired, but Chao Mu was one of them, especially at the end when Chao Mu resisted King's temptations and faced life and death with such courage. He found that truly admirable. Chao Yu laughed, saying Old Who was flattering him. Without Old Who's help, he wouldn't have even gotten past the villagers. Then he reminded Old Who of the promise to teach him that blade technique. Old Who laughed in return, assuring him not to worry. As soon as they returned to the city, he would teach him immediately. Just then an attack came, knocking Old Who down, and several flare notes were thrown towards them. They recognized the bone chorus of flame, and wondered if King wasn't actually dead. She stood up ready to strike again and taunted them. She asked if they truly thought a mere martial artist could kill her with just the most basic immortal technique. She had concealed her vital signs in a way that no top-tier martial artist could detect. Even after suffering a fatal injury, she only needed a talisman to fully recover. That was the power of the immortal techniques, something martial arts could never hope to surpass. Martial artists were only fit to kneel at the feet of immortals, and even the martial saint was no exception. Suddenly she sensed something eerie and heard a voice. It was the voice of someone who had sent her to the Xian Tianse to train for over 20 years, giving her plenty of time to hone her skills. The voice grew angrier, stating that in hope she might actually show some decent abilities. But if this was all she had to offer, she calmed herself, muttering that it was impossible. The boxer was releasing an overwhelming aura, and she wondered if changing his clothes had made him realize who he truly was. Chao Mu, however, believed that in just a single breath, the aura could be easily extinguished. The boy remarked that the presence of the boxer was 100 times stronger than King's. The man quickly understood it was the martial saint. King trembled, wondering why the martial saint was here. He was filled with rage, questioning why Chimu had been able to break the martial saint's two-way soul connection, why he couldn't sense him earlier, and how he could hide his tracks so easily. Qing then realized that she wasn't worthy of asking such questions. She knelt before him, referring to him as father, and apologized, admitting she was overwhelmed by his strength. She called herself an idiot for thinking that Just because he couldn't do it 20 years ago, it meant he couldn't now and that he was even stronger than before. The martial saint spoke, mentioning that he had named her king, hoping her heart would remain clear. But it seemed she still had some refining to do. She had yet to master the martial arts, or the basics of immortal cultivation, and he feared that, after her breakthrough, she would simply die at his hands, and her core would shatter completely. Since she wished so desperately to live, he would give her the chance. She thanked him for it, but then he demanded that she defeat him to prove she deserved to live. She was shocked, thinking that for all these years she had painstakingly avoided him, surviving in fear, and now the day had finally come. He told her to come forward, declaring that the disobedient and useless child needed to be put down. She realized he was serious. If she couldn't win, she would die. She stood up, and Kilmu wondered if she was truly going to fight to the death. It was a rare opportunity to witness the real power of the martial saint. King rushed to attack the martial saint, and Kilmu noted that she was charging straight in. Was she planning to battle using techniques? But then she jumped back, and Shomi understood. She wasn't trying to fight. She was trying to escape. She thought that she couldn't possibly win and would die. For sure she needed to return to the immortal sect, beg for forgiveness and endure the humiliation. Anything to save her life. The martial saints stepped into her path. Grabbing her by the face, Chow Mei was shocked by his speed, and wondered if such a thing was even possible for a martial artist. The martial saint remarked that Xing had once shown promise, and had talent, but now even her escape speed was mediocre. Keeping her alive had been a mistake. But thankfully mistakes could be corrected. King begged for another chance, pleading that she wanted to live. Tears welled up in her eyes as she begged him to leave her alone. She explained that the immortal sex saw her as disposable, while he saw her only as fuel for his own purpose. She asked if he knew what it was like to live in constant fear, knowing that one day she would die a miserable death, just like so many before her. The martial saint absorbed her powers and threw her to the ground. The boy stared at her skeletal body, expressing his fear that they might end up the same way. The man asked if he was scared. He reminded him that all martial artists desired to overthrow the immortals, and it was widely known that only the martial saint could make that happen. The goal of the Wuji Association was to use extreme martial power to massacre all the immortals and create eternal peace. Chow Mu, however, remarked that the first thing the martial saint did after his rise was to massacre the martial families of that era. The strongest raised their swords against those stronger than themselves, while only the weak cut down those weaker than themselves. If the martial saint couldn't kill the immortals, he killed his own people, and someone like him who truly created peace in the world. The martial saint seemed to ponder Ku Omu's words, as if he was being taught how to carry out his own ideals. Xiaomei replied that those who were truly devoted would never sacrifice their virtue for the sake of survival. They would rather die for their principles. Many martial families, the 3,000 disciples of the martial saint and 100,000 brothers, had sacrificed their lives fighting against the immortals. Since their sacrifices were justified, why didn't the martial saint sacrifice himself as well? The martial Shang responded that Chimu was truly interesting, far more so than King. He then told Chimu to prepare to die. Chimu, with a calm resolve, knelt down ready to face his death. The martial sank, instructed him to go and find a suitable weapon for himself, assuring that he would wait for Kyomu there. With grace, Kyomu used his leg to propel the spear into the air, making it spin several times before he seized it. He then rushed toward the martial sank, launching an attack as he drew closer. The martial Singh stopped the spear with a single finger. Kyomu realized that the martial Singh had relied on Kia, but had blocked it with his bare body. If that were the case, Komu had no choice but to fight to the death. He unleashed the heavenly demon disintegration technique to strike at the martial saint, but the latter continued to stop each attack with his fingers. The martial saint commented that military spearmanship, which specialized in breaking through powerful defenses, combined with a heavenly demon disintegration technique, was indeed an effective way to use force against force. Kalmu kept pressing the attack, striking at the martial saint's back. The martial saint, impressed by this smooth combination, remarked on Kalmu's youth and the remarkable number of martial arts techniques he had already mastered. However, he cautioned that the heavenly demon disintegration was a technique that harmed the user 1,000 times more than the enemy. and that without a proper martial arts path, it was ultimately worthless. He then uses power to force Chimu back, causing his spear to break. Chao Mei regained his balance, and thought to himself that it was truly impressive, just as expected of the martial arts leader, a perfect target for training. He told the martial saint not to get cocky, as he knew more than just the heavenly demon disintegration technique. The martial saint stood before Cao Mu, pointing out that using longevity in a fighting style inherited from the Cao family wasn't enough to match his power. With a swift movement he attacked Xiao Mu's head, striking it so hard that Xiao Mu was slammed into the ground, causing the building to shake. Onlookers were concerned for Xiao Mu's safety. Meanwhile, inside the building, the martial saint wondered to himself why it was always others who had to sacrifice, and why it was never him who died. He reflected on the fact that the world only knew him as the martial saint, but they didn't know the truth, that a martial saint wasn't born one. In the first half of his life, his martial arts progressed rapidly, as did his official career, but after his defeat by the Immortals, he abandoned his official position and devoted himself entirely to martial arts. During this time, he created the martial saint's spiritual residence technique and sought out the 10 strongest martial artists in the world. He taught them the complete martial saint's spiritual residence technique and agreed to a decisive battle. 10 years later, the victor of this battle would absorb the martial arts of the other strong warriors and ascend to the title of martial saint. Back then, any of the top 10 martial artists could have become a martial saint. It was simply that he was the last one, standing a true survival of the fittest, and that was the ultimate truth of the world. It was the very essence of his martial arts, and Xiao Mu in his weakened state was no match for it. His ribs had shattered, and with a backlash from the heavenly demon disintegration, he was no different from a corpse. The martial saint taunted Kyomu, claiming that he was so weak that he wasn't even qualified for the martial saint to absorb. Despite this, Kyomu forced himself to stand and rush at the martial saint, attempting to land a punch. The martial saints stopped him with a calm remark, noting that Chimu was merely struggling on the verge of death. He then observed that Chimu's arm was broken. Still, Chimu pushed forward and attacked with a different fist, channeling the ripple wave force wave after wave. Utilizing 60% of his power, Kyomu attacked with the principal waves, using 7/10 of his power. The martial saint observed that, in an effort to find an opportunity to counterattack, Kyomu had severed his own arm. Even in this desperate situation, with his consciousness fading, Kyomu's body refused to retreat from the battle. The martial saint found this willpower to be rare and remarkable. As Kyomu pushed the martial saint outside the building, the boy, worried about him, mentioned that the martial saint was actually being suppressed. The boy recalled the Cao clan's secret technique, the rippling inner strength technique, which release only 50 to 70% of its force with each strike. However, within the briefest moment of impact, a second burst of force remained unreleased. When the two layers of strength stacked together like waves, crashing upon each other, the total destructive power exceeded 100%. Encouraging Xiao Mu, the boy urged him to keep going and defeat the martial saint. Xiao Mu continued to punch the martial saint relentlessly. The martial saint, laughing, remarked that Xiao Mu was more interesting than he had expected. Suddenly he grabbed Xiao Mu's face, intending to absorb him. The boy warned that this was the same technique that had devoured Xing, and it put Xiao Mu in danger. Xiao Mu defiantly asked the martial saint who he thought he was looking down on him and now wanting to devour him as well. But Xiao Mao knew he was the weakest of his clan, and that his family still had countless elders and hidden masters who would not let him fall so easily. For generations the Chao clan had pursued the path of sacrificing themselves for righteousness, and the martial saint's devouring of men seemed like the perfect match for Chao Mao. If the martial saint consumed his clan's flesh, blood and bones, would he even slay the immortals? The boy wondered what Xiaomi was doing. Was he betraying his family? No, it couldn't be. He must have had another purpose. Perhaps he was challenging the martial saint in the name of the Kyle clan. The martial saint, sensing Kyle Mu's determination, told him that since he was so eager to die, he would grant Kyle Mu's wish. He began absorbing Cao Mu, only to release his body moments later. The martial saint turned to the others and said that they too should stop fearing and hating him. He urged them to grow stronger, for one day they would have to stand before him again. That was the only path for them to survive. The boy thought to himself that the martial saint wasn't killing Xiao Mei. Not yet. At least the martial saint was waiting for the right moment, biding his time until his fruits ripen, ready to harvest them. The boy then declared that he wouldn't let the martial saint have his way. He would spread word of the martial saint's actions to the world. In response, the martial saint brought Kyo-mu back to life and said, "Let the world hear it," and he welcomed all challengers. Afterward, Kyo-mu woke up, his arms severed. He wondered why the martial saint hadn't killed him. Was it because he intended to use Kyle-mu as bait to lure the Cow clan? He wondered why he hadn't been killed yet. His broken body beyond saving. He didn't want to die in vain. The martial saint sat next to him drinking something, and Kyle-mu asked him to at least say something. Was he afraid to kill him? Perhaps he feared that the Cow family would come for revenge. Chow Yu even called the martial Sing a coward. The martial Sing, however, merely shrugged, saying whether Chow Yu lived or died was up to him. Kyle-mu lay there, saying he understood that the martial saint wanted him to suffer, to live on in that broken body, rather than granting him a quick death. The martial Sink asked if he had already given up. Chimu snapped at him to get lost or finish him off quickly. The martial Sink then asked if Chimu wanted to master the divine techniques, offering to help him achieve that, if Chimu would assist him in one thing, promising to grant him the greatest reward of all. Kuomyu was incredulous after all. They had just been fighting to the death. And now the martial saint wanted him to work with him. The martial saint urged him not to be so quick to refuse, and pointed toward a distant place. "Look there," he said. "That's the famed Kaiming Mountain of the Ku-Omyu province. At its peak stands the King Yen Monastery, the headquarters of the Shintian faction Steve. Those lights stretching up the mountain. So many people make pilgrimages there." Kyomiu and the martial saints sat on the roof of the house. The martial saints said let the common folk remain ignorant. But now even the emperor of Dian bows to them. Xiaomu scoffed. That madman emperor wants to worship them as he lost all his dignity. The martial saint shook his head. This was an aberration. And if you understand the significance of the emperor's bow, with the Son of Heaven asks the people follow. If the entire nation begins worshipping these so-called immortals, superstition will spread and the people will never stand tall again.